Hey gang, it's Fillmore. For those of you who are jonesing for the extra Sunday episodes, no longer available on YouTube, you can access them on patreon.com/JimFix, JIMFIXX. If you sign up for the Whiskey Sobbing Computer Board level at $2.50 a month, you'll have access not only to those extra Sunday episodes that are no longer available on YouTube, but you will get 50% of the Patreon content going forward. If you would like full access to all Sunday episodes, all Patreon content, including the last 32 episodes or 33 episodes produced thus far, just sign up for the Black Kluge $5 level or higher. If you want to give us more money, you are more than welcome to. For those of you who don't do PayPal, or Patreon rather, we have a PayPal address as well, johnnythegreek21@gmail.com. For those of you who cannot get Patreon to work and would like to use PayPal as a method of monthly payment, we will only accept donations from the Black Kluge level or higher. And privately, personally, we will send you all the episodes on Patreon and the missing Sunday episodes, of course.
Oh, he doesn't?
Dude, Howard, I've always wanted to know one thing. Did you or did you not get Robin Givens?
I don't know. All right, here, look, come here. No, I'm saying I would never.
What do you mean
I
What do you mean you don't know?
No, I didn't.
I don't know.
No, I did not.
You'd have to know.
Right.
But if someone wants to fix themselves,
Different thing.
I am telling you that it is possible. There is no such thing as genetic homosexuality. It's fixable.
heterosexual.
I know the guy who can fix it. He doesn't even know he can fix it.
So he hasn't said this is a cure for this
No.
problem.
No, but I am telling you homosexuality is fixable. Hello.
Do you have a big dick?
Did you go into therapy?
You've never been to a psychiatrist?
It does. I like that. I like to hear that guys are whacking off.
Yeah. I don't want to be in a wig and a purse. I do that in my personal life.
No.
No, I'm just like a happy-go-lucky guy.
And all this is about having fun.
That's right.
Kat, what do you do for a living? And it's not one of those, oh, who are you? But what do you do for a living?
Really not.
You do therapy?
No.
Never?
I've dabbled.
I'm there every day.
My daughter's 15. All her friends are like consumed with who's gay and who isn't. Yeah, that's like a big thing.
the new thing.
Yeah, right. They think I'm gay. Everyone's gay.
Richard, what?
You come over, Tzvi. They named me Tzvi. First of all, fuck you. My name is Howard.
Why can't you just be Howard? Why do you have to have a separate
They had to
name?
give you a Hebrew name.
How before they work weeks?
Nah. The audience gets mad at me if I take a week off. I can't take Fridays off.
I think the audience would rather have
How
you
mad
4
are they
days
going to
than no
be?
days.
Yeah, if you're not there at all.
Yeah.
Well, it's better not to be there. I believe radio is a habitual kind of medium. That people wake up in the morning, they go to work, and they want to hear their favorite disc jockey.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you're not there on Fridays, you are doing a disservice to the audience, and you're not doing your job.
I don't think I'm interested in the 5-day-a-week sketch.
Oh,
You know?
it came with that?
Yeah. Well, terrestrial radio, you got to do a 5-day-a-week sketch. Satellite's different.
Because I drive into Manhattan every day and I listen to you, okay? And if you cut out the bitching, it probably would be about an hour of broadcast.
You're right. And you want to know something? Okay.
So
Now, how long are you going to keep the hair?
I'm going to keep the hair as long as it keeps on top of my head. What do you mean?
There's a point in time that it's...
Is my hair too long, you think?
When you get a certain age, I think that the
You
hair...
think it looks silly?
Yeah.
You do?
Really?
I do.
So this is Riley Martin?
Yes.
Okay. Friend of the aliens.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
right.
Why are you people bugging my time with 4 hours of faggotism? I mean, Jesus Christ, man. Can't you come up with another solution?
Welcome, everybody, to QF, a podcast about Howard Stern. I'm your host, Fillmore, a.k.a. Jim Fix, and with me for this particular episode in the Colford saga installment is Benjamin. How are you, Ben?
Good. It's been a few months since we talked.
Yes, and we've been quite busy getting stuff done, but also we needed to finish up a few sagas. We're tying up, finally, the 15 Foundation. We got part 9 finished, and the last one is probably going to be a 2-parter, but it includes the March for the Bagels, which I might need your help with.
Okay. You couldn't stretch that into a 15-parter just for poetic?
It would be perfect. But we just couldn't do it. And people loved the last one because that included the goodbye, Jason. But we managed to get the video, which is really crucial for that particular segment of the year. At any rate, the last time we were in, guys, we were discussing it was more about Wellmet and Howard's High School, and he was, King Schmaltz Bagel Hour. And we're going to get into his stint at WRNW, his first time there, and we've got a lot of clips to play, so we'll go right into it. But before we do, anything you want to add?
No, I'm raring to go on this one.
Okay, if you guys are all
everyone loves the Wellmet stuff. I take it.
I think so,
and especially if you're like me and you remember basically where you were when Howard rewrote Wellmet. And I think it was 2011, 2012, around that, where he suddenly was the camp's Romeo. And this book will tell a different story from what he currently tells.
Well, it's odd because it's almost like you throw a rock and you're going to get a different story. So it's not odd, I guess. It's not really odd when you know him. But in Private Parts, he talks about having had a couple flings here and there, but nothing really. Then in 2019, 2020, it becomes, I couldn't get anybody. And then in that clip, that infamous clip where the caller calls in to bust his balls about Beth controlling him, he claims, I was banging a lot of hot women. Call my boss, Woody Belkin, who was his supervisor at Wellmet.
Woody Belkin.
And you know what? I did look up Woody Belkin, and he is some kind of properties attorney. He's like some real estate attorney. And he has a website, and he did an interview about Stern. And he has a couple odds and ends, maybe from Wellmet, still in his office. But I would love to have emailed him and asked him and played him the audio and said, what do you have to say about this? Did you fire him for almost fucking too many students, underage Wellmet campers? So either way, guys, if you're following along, we're on page 30 and 31. And unfortunately, Sam can't make it for this one because there's, I guess, on the East Coast, there's a huge snow, ice problem with the winter storm, so she's going to be missed, but we'll try to soldier through. First clip is actually from January 31st, 2007, and it's a caller calls in, a Tommy from Malden type caller calls in, and Howard explains in unflinching, stammer-free, stutter-free dialogue exactly how stupid he was and how he got into Boston University, which is very important when people start asking us, why do you call him 79? Why do you claim this and that? Raven did the math, and apparently the SAT score he talked about, it was the equivalent of a grade point average. I can't remember, but it was something like when she did the math, his SAT score was something like 50 or 60%.
Wow.
Yeah. So
not surprised.
No, not at all.
Still, wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we don't know he's on heroin. He could be sick.
Come on, Robin. You guys are smart. Neither of you are dumb.
Well, then call me dumb because I think he's sick.
No way. Howard, you're not dumb. You went to BU. You're a smart man.
BU.
There's your credential.
They made all the geniuses into BU. You know that I went to BU, but I went to retard BU. Like I didn't even go to the real BU. It
wasn't even the real college?
Yeah, there's a college at Boston University for idiots. It's to milk parents who can't normally get their kids into the school.
Okay, I'll let this one play through.
I was a real idiot. Oh. And BU has a program called, it's like the Special Olympics. It was called Basic Studies. It doesn't get embarrassing than that. Like when you're trying to pick up a chick at BU and you tell her you're in Basic Studies, you're like, fucking loser.
Yeah.
They head for the hills. You think it was easy to get laid with this face and being in Basic Studies? And Basic Studies, the deal was, even though you're a shit student, you can't even score above 1,000 on your SATs, we're going to let you into BU, let your old man pay the freight, and you got to, for 2 years, take everything you were supposed to take in high school, but you fucked up.
Keep in mind, guys, that this is the guy who, when he switched from Roosevelt to Rockville Center, was told, he's not going to integrate well educationally because, he's used to a lower standard of education. I think he was just a Dunsky both places, and he was at his level at Roosevelt and went into the deep end and sank once he got to Rockville Center.
He talks about in Private Parts. I just was skipping through it yesterday, and I can't find it right handily here. But he talks about being one of the smartest people at Roosevelt.
Yes.
Now, why then was he reading? Why was he in a remedial class then? If he's one of the smartest kids at Roosevelt,
and he and
wasn't
Robin
even the smartest kid in the remedial class.
And he and Robin have that in common, by Robin's own admission. Yes, they were in the slow class. So we're not talking a big, huge think tank here, guys, at the Howard Stern show over the years, including Stuttering John. And anyway, let's continue.
So you're really in high school?
I'm in high school. I was in high school for 2 more years. Believe me, this was no college. I was studying like high school chemistry, humanities, which was actually watching movies. And it was like retard school. And then if you passed retard school, they'd let you for the next 2 years get into, like the School of Communications, where I'd study radio. I'd study fucking radio. What's the study of radio? There wasn't one professor that
you
ever
weren't
think
making radios.
No.
This is ironic. He denigrates the study of radio, but was a huge fuck up both at college radio and then his first gig, which we're going to cover in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have needed another 2 years of BU at the School of Communications just to keep from fucking up certain things. Although, to his credit, Meg Griffin, who when she does get on the air, and you'll hear her voice amongst others, credits she gives a little credit to him because of the she explains his mea culpa that the equipment at the first place at WRNW was not particularly good. So she gave him a pass for that. So.
We made radios. It would have made sense. Study radio. I'm sure my old man was having a conniption. It cost him like $5,000 a year at the time, which was a lot of money for my father.
Listen,
so I didn't even go. Like, people say I went to BU. That's bullshit. I should have been in Nassau Community. I got in on a fluke. BU.
I love you guys.
Thank you.
It's great. I've had
Later.
this now for a month, and this is the fucking best I've ever heard.
Correct.
Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's the unexpurgated version of what he does parrot a lot of that in Private Parts of the book. But later on in the history of Howard Stern, if you listen to the 2007, the first part 1, he talks about how he did really well when he graduated summa cum laude or something like that.
Yeah. I think he had great tutoring, which has been a lifelong aid of his. He's always relied on tutoring.
Yes.
Even when it comes to journaling nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
With Adventure Denali.
Well, yes. He's got a tutor for just about everything. A weatherman tutor. Let's see. The next clip, Wiggy becomes a 20-year-old counselor at Wellmet. So believe it or not, guys, even though he's at BU, he still decides to go back to camp. And I found that extremely telling that, he's still needing to go back there where he feels he's happening, because there's a bit of Lou talk, a lot of Lou talk, and Lou gets his, The
mythology always is that he was with the same woman since he was 19 years old, right? He always says, I was with that woman since I was 19. So if he's 20 and going back as a counselor, then that means he's with Allison.
That's right. He's cheating on her, or trying to cheat on her.
Right. And if he is the Romeo of camp, then he and nearly getting fired, then he is cheating on her. But they can never quite nail down. And every story Howard tells, he says he was 19 when he was with Allison, except that in the official version, he was a junior, so he was 20 when he met Allison. And I don't know if that was, I need to paint myself as a guy who wasn't cheating. And maybe they had some kind of a long distance relationship that he wasn't upholding his end of the bargain. But you can't be 19 with Allison and 20 and banging every coworker of yours. That doesn't work.
No. And beyond that, guys, and keep in mind the details sell the story, but yet the details don't seem to match anywhere, including when he starts talking about his first air shift, his first paid air shift, and when it was. Because in the Colford book, Colford says it was in Christmas of the year in question. New Year's. He says New Year's. So you've already got another reliable narrator.
I think I understand why that might be too, because Howard, as a Jewish guy, would not be celebrating Christmas.
No,
and might be sensitive about wanting people to know that he was the scab who would go and work on Christmas when the other who, by the way, were all fired by the new Jewish owners except for Howard and Yubi, the sales manager. I would not be surprised if he's sensitive about that and just decided, you know what, I'm only half Jewish. Let's make it New Year's.
Right. So let's continue with this next clip. It's called Wiggy Becomes a 20-Year-Old Counselor at Wellmet.
During the summer of 1974, Howard returned to Camp Wellmet as a staff counselor on a 6-week trip to Yellowstone National Park and
this one, by the way, guys, is page 31 in the book if you're following.
Points West. As he helped to supervise about 36 younger teenagers, he seemed no less a juvenile himself. Wearing a silly-looking round hat, his Adam's apple bobbing at the throat of his immensely gawky frame, he played disc jockey on the Odyssey, holding the bus microphone to a cassette player armed with rock music. The 20-year-old Howard, whom everyone called Howie, displayed the same interests and level of maturity that he would popularize on the radio. He was obsessed with his phallus, which he called his schween, recalled Carrie D. Preston, who was among Howard's charges. He's really never grown up, if you ask me.
What's cut out of there is a little one line where it says he'd say things like, "This oatmeal is sexually abused," and he had a ritual of phallicizing. He'd pick out things that looked like a penis, such as a cucumber or even a jet airplane. It's interesting what.
Why would they cut out? Yes, that is a fascinating insight that I'm sure his therapist would be dying to know about if that's the case.
Yes, especially
this is what he's seeing everywhere he looks.
Yeah, and he's a Jungian-based therapist.
I mean, think of a cartoon where you're on a desert island and you look over and you're seeing mirages. You know, you're not seeing a beautiful woman if you're Howard. You're seeing penises.
You're seeing dicks.
Yeah.
He sounds on the radio now like the same person he was on that camping trip in 1974.
And that's something you get from a lot of people. Do you remember when Robin did I don't know if it was 1993 or was the book promotion tour. I think it was her 19 Quivers of Life promo tour where she explained, I think it's the what you're hearing is the sounds of a guy who never really got past a certain stage in his life. You know, like whether we're talking about Howard's immaturity level. I think it was from the Baltimore Sun or something. And she hit the nail on the head pretty much.
Yes, and she's not alone in that observation. No. I think even in private parts at the end, they might conclude that he's stuck around there. I mean, he's definitely the Peter Pan syndrome poster boy, and you know that keeps you locked in that adolescence for good. And he's so happy. I mean, we've heard many times that the happiest time in his life was Camp Wellmet, and it might even have been this trip. But you know, it's funny about this trip. Did you get the idea ever that the girls on the campers were around age 13?
Well, the picture in question that you and I are both thinking about in our minds is him with a couple of girls, and he's freakishly
towering over them.
Towering over them, and they all look. And I mean, and it's true, guys, back in the day, people who were young, like people at the age of 13 back 20, 30, 40 years ago really did look 13. Now they look a little bit older, but you can tell the difference between a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old by looking at their eyes. They're just everything. And they do look like 12 in that picture. 12,
they look young.
13, they look really young.
Yeah. And what I was going to point out is that Howard, he's sexualized those kids many times. He's said that there was one in particular who was really hot for him. And one thing that he'll do is round down his age. So he's not 20 and he's not 19. 20 and a half. He's 19, he's 18, and the girls are not 13, they're 15, 16. So they're getting closer to about 2 years apart in age.
Yes.
In his cleaned up version of it. But when you look at that picture, you see a huge difference. I mean, not only in their height and everything, but they look like little kids.
Yes,
and
they do.
You know, he's got his lecherous shirt unbuttoned, so you can see his nipple hanging out.
Right.
And it's creepy. And he's not the kind of guy you want your child left in the care of.
No. And we've got the clips to play, guys, and we will do that. This is 6B, how the Millie Bobby Brown stuff makes sense.
One summer, we went cross country. We actually went cross country and we were like counselors.
On that bus?
Yeah, taking 40 high school kids cross country. All the kids on the bus were doing each other.
You still weren't getting it.
And I wasn't getting it. I couldn't make it with the campers.
Now, he says high school, but he doesn't indicate specifically what year of high school. And I think that's deliberate. Now, he's going to start going and say 16, but I think in his head he's going, I got to recalculate here because this is sounding a little creepier and whatever. I'll save myself.
I have to make it sound almost legal.
Yes, right.
Even though I would have liked to.
Yeah, you couldn't use that authority position to even get the campers.
I'm real honorable that way. I didn't go after any of the campers.
You didn't violate that trust.
Even though there were one or two who wanted to.
Yeah.
And one of them once dragged me off into the woods and said, I like you. And I was like, well, wait a second, you're 16. And actually, I was
How old were you?
I was like 19. So 19 or 20 wouldn't have been that unthinkable. But hey, I had a position of authority and I wasn't going to abuse it.
If one of them's dragging you off to the woods, how are you being led by a younger person into the woods?
Yeah.
That's another thing that doesn't make sense.
And by the way, all he does is abuse his position of authority. Why do you think his staff is showing him their penises and spreading their cheeks for the camera and all that kind of stuff, or sitting between two staffers and stroking? It's because he's abusing his power. And his defenders will say, that's just the show. It's the show because the guy in power has decided it's the show.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other show like it.
No, and there isn't. And this latest jizz hat nonsense that you're hearing is literally, do it or get fired or risk getting fired. And Wilding's more than happy to do anything to keep his green card.
Said he didn't want to go to jail.
What changed?
Yeah, right.
Plus, you didn't want to go to jail.
Yeah, these kids were underage.
But so were you. You weren't an adult.
Over 18 is an adult in New York.
Really?
Statutory rape. You're over 18. You're going to jail.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, you had read the law, I think.
Obviously. Now, a guy knows that stuff. Sort of like you don't go on the radio without knowing what the FCC's all bummed out
You're
about.
kidding me. An 18-year-old guy can't make love to a 15-year-old girl?
Oh, no. Not.
Sounds like he did quite a bit of research into it.
Yeah, I'm surprised Robin is so clueless. Maybe, I don't know at the time. Maybe that was not well known.
No, well, who knows? And also maybe laws did, and we do know that they, from state to state, does vary, and probably still it did then, and I'm sure it still does now. Age of consent, yeah. So
I'm surprised he didn't take the ladder that she was offering him, basically, where he could have said, maybe it was legal. I'm surprised that she was extending that help to him. He could have taken it. I'm surprised he didn't.
Yeah, the creep ladder. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Here, maybe where Jerry Lee Lewis got married.
I was going to say the rest of the country's closing down.
Yeah, you got to be cool on that stuff. You really got to be cool.
I got to check that. I don't think that's true.
Anyway, you check it out.
It's true. It's true. Guys know.
They all know.
Believe me,
it sounds like Bowie's done a bit of. He's no stranger. He's the one that's his big fetish is teen porn. So it wouldn't surprise me if Gary was a little bit immersed in that himself.
And so his only conflict was it's illegal.
It's illegal, right?
Not I shouldn't be doing this because of the power role I have, and the unsupervised child I'm with, and so on.
Yeah, totally.
It's true. Also, when when you're in a position of being the authority, the counselor.
Tell that to a lot of teachers and professors out.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm working to change that law so that 14-year-olds can make it with 37-year-olds, right?
Okay, if that wasn't a little bit creepy. Now here's some more stuff that I'm going to play, guys, as a little bit of a. It's just something you need to hear. This is from 2000, and this is something I can't remember the guy's name on Twitter, but he keeps linking to my original video from my first channel on the old site where the place we used to frequent as being evidence. But it's been long since deleted. But here is the original clip I had on my old channel.
Well, those are the two kids from Full House. Remember the two little girls from Full House?
Sure.
Well, now they're like...
This is from 2000, by the way, and they were 13 years old at the time when he said this. 13. Let that sink in, guys.
13, and they're pieces of ass.
Oh, yeah, I've seen pictures of it, because they still are. They have such an incredible career.
But let me say something. And normally I don't look at a 13-year-old and sexualize them. I don't. But these two are pieces of ass. They're growing up perfect.
Are they budding yet?
Yeah.
Oh.
Their boobies are out. So, I mean, and don't get me wrong. I'm not into 13-year-olds.
Well, yes, you are.
Oh, she's right. She is absolutely right. And then we go in further, guys. We get a little closer to now. He did the same with Millie Bobby Brown, who was in Stranger Things, and probably she's doing other things. But she was, if I'm not mistaken, I think she's 18 now, so she would have been 13 at the time of this recording in 2017 from, if you're looking, guys, October 25th. And it's just called El Creepo Millie Bobby Brown shit.
And, listen, thank God she's growing up nice. She's not getting any of that awkward stage like that lispy kid.
Yeah, she doesn't look awkward. You're right.
I said to her, Millie, we can't tolerate you having some sort of awkward stage. You got to do a Brooke Shields and just be hot from the time you're a little girl to the time you're a woman.
Okay, there's that. And then the next part, which is really short as well.
Between you and me, I wouldn't say it to her. She's a young lady, but God forbid she gets like a flat chested. Her tits don't grow when she gets older. Now I'm talking as an adult here. We got a surgeon all lined up to do a boob job on her.
Oh, my goodness.
That's right. A top guy. She's going to be a D cup whether she likes it or not.
Oh, my.
Oh, and that stupid fucking agent voice, which is basically a revamp of Johnny Fry's shit thing. And now there's
also him doing Steve Dahl's Anthony DiGiovanni character.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the guy from Anthony. Chicago.
Yeah, it's the Chicago accent.
Yeah. Well, there's another clip that I'm not going to play. I should, but it's from the Scarlett Johansson interview from years earlier where he said, did you have problems, being, a hot 10, the kids thought you were hot. And she said something like a hot 10-year-old. And she took him to task and he goes, well, maybe the other people thought you were hot. And it just came off so creepy, and she was creeped out. There was no two ways about it. In the time that we took to look for a couple of photos that I'm going to include in the video, guys, assuming this makes it to YouTube, as some of you will already know by now, we've gone behind a partial paywall, and some of these will make it to Patreon and some of these will make it to YouTube. But this particular clip, we mentioned the Scarlett Johansson clip, so I said, why not use that time and get it? And so I did. Here we go.
Cool. When you go to public school and they go, hey, there's the kid who is in North and just was on Off-Broadway. You must have been like and you're hot. It must be like
a hot 10-year-old.
The other 10-year-old probably thought you were attractive.
I don't know about that.
Were you not a hot 10-year-old? If you're in the movies, you're a hot 10-year-old.
Yeah, you can go back and look.
When I was a 10-year-old little boy, there were 10-year-old girls. I was really turned on.
I'm getting really
it was appropriate.
Yeah.
So he's always had this. He's always fetishized really young teens.
Yeah, and this is a guy who has had 3 10-year-old daughters of his own.
Yes, absolutely. And so I don't know. I just don't know, guys. You'll have to make of it what you can, like whether you think he's gay or whether you think he's a pervert or whether you think he's straight or bi or whatever, everything.
Or like I say, Peter Pansexual.
Or Peter Pansexual, as Ben likes to call him, then it's still, whatever it is, it's still fucking weird. And what Ben did was dig up the photos of the Olsen twins, which you will have seen in the video, hopefully. But if not, if it goes on Patreon, we'll still upload the photos. And there's no question you can look at the girls you can look at the Olsen twins and you see that they look 12, not 13. They look younger than what they are. They look maybe 10 or 11 actually. And it's creepy as fuck to hear him say that about these girls. And it came right out of him. That's why I don't think it's about being shocking. It's about what he really feels. And we know that the truth out of Howard usually comes when you don't hear a stutter or stammer.
Howard had 2 daughters older than Mary-Kate and Ashley when he made that comment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're going to go into the part 6C. Dr. Luce drops some fruity science. This is from the History of Howard Stern.
I think he was like most guys his age. He was awkward and trying to find his way, and goofing around. And, we went to camp from the time we were 10 until when we worked at the kitchen. I was there till I was about 17. So you run the gamut of growing up and chasing girls. And that was an interesting part of Wellmet because the girls' bunks were not really far away from the guys' bunks. So Now, keep in mind, Lou went until he was 17. Howard went until he was 20.
20 and a half.
Right. And it's not a little bit creepy about that. Yeah. And again, the abuse of power, the idea that he could actually do that and then later on pretty much mimic that with the interns on his own show. You guys draw your own conclusions, but we'll just lay it out there for you.
I wonder if the only reason he was even charged with supervising these kids is because the next choice was 17. So as a 20-year-old, all right, we'll go with the 20-year-old. You know, if most people are bailing at 17, and you got a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, you're going to choose the guy who can
go to jail,
check into a hotel if you needed to at the last minute. Yeah,
that's true. Someone who, being that little bit older, might be that make them feel a little more secure.
Yeah, because I don't know that he would have passed a psychological evaluation if they determined here's how we determine who is in charge of these kids.
Not if you saw that photo of him with the nipple exposed.
Even though Wellmet itself was sort of like a psychology experiment in a way.
Yeah.
It was, he mentions this at one point, but it was sort of run and supervised by, I want to give you the exact quote. So let me find what it is.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah. So what I have here this is from Camp Wellmet's guest book, online guest book. And it was posted in October 2003 by Howard himself. Sharing this Wellmet memory with some others. And what he says was, I was there from the time I was 9 to my second year of college, camper all the way through the Western trip, kitchen boy, counselor in Unit 5, and then counselor on the Western trip with Woody Belkin and Andrea Gold. The entire time I was at camp, I had no idea that a bunch of social workers were in charge and using me for some sort of college credit. I was blissfully oblivious to adult supervision and lived each summer like I was on my own and fully in charge of my own destiny. Anyway, he goes on to say that when he's down, he actually says, when I'm down, whenever the FCC begins to get me down, I just think back to my days as a kitchen boy. That's literally what he says. Yeah,
so
you would think that was an imposter.
Depressing. So he's Trent Reznor when the FCC is going
about
after
the
him.
FCC. The FCC, who has never pulled a penny out of my pocket.
Oh my Lord!
Yeah,
God. That
so anyway,
FCC
it was some kind of a So anyway, this was. It's funny. It was how social workers tie into his life because Allison was a social worker.
Yes.
And anyway, and I believe his daughter might now be one of them too, or may have been.
Okay, let me think. Okay, Emily's the rabbi, Ashley's the nurse, and I think it was Deborah that went to Vietnam and I don't know what, taught English or and then she might have. Yeah, but she might have studied social work. That might be what her vocation ended up being. Anyway,
none of them went into radio.
No, and Allison needed psychology just to deal with the maniac she was married to.
Yes.
Let's continue with Dr. Lou's recollections of camp.
We were all trying to meet girls. And I guess you could say he was a little bit awkward with it. But once we got into the older age groups, I guess, we just say he got lucky. Yeah, sure.
He had more relationship in those areas with his mother, but he always told me about this girl he met, and he likes her, she wants to be a doctor. I says, very good, you marry her and you make out the Medicare forms and let her take care of the patients. It's a perfect match.
I think he has pretty accurate when it comes to how girls...
Okay, one sec, guys.
Treated him. He always had girls as friends. He didn't have too many girlfriends. They always loved Howard, but they didn't love Howard.
This is like not only mind warping, guys, time warping. It's everything because if you listen to the clips we're going to be playing, which is the next one, for example, I was fucking a model in college. This is the aforementioned segment from the aforementioned rant.
And we've talked about this before, but Howard had on some girls from camp who said that everyone thought that Howard and Lou were gay.
Yes. Yeah, we did have that in one of the previous episodes for sure.
I was fucking a model in college. The entire Boston University hated me because everybody wanted this woman.
What I really wanted to find was the video of this because it's way more entertaining to see his eyes darting from and the dead air because Robin's not willing to help him. Fred's not willing to help him. And they know that he's just raging against a story that he knows is actually true. So he has to decide he's going to come up with this fairy tale. And meanwhile, his whole career was was dictated on was based on being a loser, and now you're going to turn it around and make it like you were, I don't know, like some huge coxman.
Yeah, and BU is big. How in the world would the entire campus know this guy is dating her? I'm livid. But now he brought this girl on to his show, didn't he, on Channel 9?
I don't know if it was the one Andrea that came in a couple times.
Andrea, okay.
Because there's a few that he brought in. There was the Channel 9, sorry, the Fox pilots. Then there was the on the air, this Andrea, I believe her name was, and there was a couple years where he brought this person back in, late 90s, early 2000s as well. And I can't remember if it's the same girl, but either way, on the if you look at the Fox pilot, when we covered that section, she looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. It looked extremely uncomfortable. And this is continuing the rant, guys. Oh, sorry, one second.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in Private Parts, he talks a little bit about sex. Apparently, his freshman year is when this mostly takes place. This action that he was getting.
Yes.
And he talks about dating some girl named Beth, who he begged to sleep with him because he had already known at least 3 guys she'd already slept with.
Right. So she's a pincushion.
Yeah. Yeah. So he said we had nothing in common. She was pretty mindless. I had nothing to say to her, but she was gorgeous. So I fucked her again. And here we go. Beth and I had intense sex for about a week. I mean, this girl was totally into me. One time she was giving me a blowjob and I was about to come, so I pulled her head away from my God. Can you believe he wrote this? And I shot all over her hair. This is Private Parts. So anyway, she was boring. I couldn't tolerate being around her anymore, so I dumped her. That is absurd. If this guy, who is so desperate for any attention, gets this hot girl who's so sexual, and he's 18 years old. Anyway, so he says, I want to just quickly say that. So he gets, those are his few exploits in freshman year, but he starts out this paragraph. Sophomore year was no better. I think I fucked one girl. So now I was a junior and I was studying hard. That's it.
Yeah.
So he talks about maybe one girl sophomore, but now we know he was nearly fired for all the banging he was doing. That was somehow wasn't worth mentioning in Private Parts.
No, I guess not. So this is the continuation, guys.
I'm not saying I was the biggest stud, but I got mine. And I fucked some pretty good looking women way before I was Howard Stern on the radio. Fuck off. Assholes.
I'm not sure which I like better. The Scott the Engineer, fuck everyone, or assholes. Under his breath, sotto voce, as if to say, I've nailed you all.
Do you know the context of this?
There was a guy
called, he just suddenly.
There was a guy called into the wrap-up show, and he was playing the clip, and he said, Howard's a star fucker. He used to be a very like supposedly blue collar guy. Now he's, meeting with celebs, and he does whatever Beth wants, and he's neutered. And so he got pissed off at that. And that's why I was absolutely digging for searching like a madman for the actual video footage, which I'm sure I have somewhere on one hard drive somewhere. And his eyes were darting full dart. It was Pong once again. And he decided, and the amount of dead air and the fumbling he did, like, call Woody Belkin. And you have to stop. You're fucking too many people. You're fucking coworkers, like you're fucking other counselors, but you're at college. Which is it? Like my boss. He's a coordinator at the camp. I don't know. There's certain designations you use. He was fumbling so much, it made it obvious to me that he was just making it up. Like he did the way it came out of his mouth. It was obvious to me, at least, that he was just making it up on the fly. And as we know, he can't improv worth a shit.
Why doesn't he call Woody Belkin? How are we supposed to call Woody Belkin? Put Woody Belkin on the phone. Why is it that in the history of campers coming to visit, they never said, "Oh, Howard, you should have seen him. Everybody wanted Howard." Why is it that it only came out in this instance? Right. I would guess that was 2011 or 12 or so. Whenever it was
2011, right? And I have it here, but I can't remember the exact date and I can't remember. I find it on Mark's Friggin'. It's tough.
I remember I was living in New York City, and hearing that, I was like, what? I have been listening to this guy for, at that point, it had been 17 years or something like that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And suddenly, just like that, he had just rewritten his prowess.
I remember at the old place, you made a comment that, and I never forgot this one, that you believed he was conflating. He decided to make himself Jay Thomas, who was fucking employees at the radio station on air while not on air. I mean, he muted the mic, but he was fucking them on the thing while a record was playing, and then telling him about it.
Yeah, that he definitely takes what he likes from certain people's lives and says, "That's me now."
Yes.
And I don't remember specifically saying that, but it does seem like something he would do. Other guys got in trouble for this. I'll take that and say I got in trouble for this.
Well
he's
that's
like
I know
Jay
a guy.
Peterman from Seinfeld. Go ahead and put that in the book.
Pretty much. So the next one is called "Jealous of Dr. Lou the Coxman."
Yeah, I remember. Then I got to college and it was worse. My roommate, Lou, now a medical. Imagine this guy, good-looking football player, straight A student, perfect score on the SATs, and in 6-year medical. Can you imagine the women he was attracting? We would go, like, we knew some girls from camp. I met Lou in camp, and we ended up being roommates. We'd walk in the room. They would all line up for Lou.
This is from, if you're looking, guys, 2020, November 3rd.
To have a few minutes with like The Bachelor, on The Bachelor when they all line up to try to get can I steal you for a minute?
I don't know, but go ahead. Thank you for telling us, Howard.
Can I talk to him for a minute? Can I steal you for a minute? And I'm sitting there again with the cigarette and the hair, looking like a chimney with hair. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I'm like, this has got to end. I think they thought I was Lou's dog or pet.
Oh, jeez.
No, they said what he had to wait for Lou's rejects. That was the quote from the person that he brought into the studio and called her a bitch and all these things.
They knew that you were Lou's angry boyfriend, essentially, sitting there going, why aren't we back in the room together? I mean, what are the odds that Lou gets perfect scores on the SATs?
Yeah.
And Howard gets... he does well, let's say.
Yeah, sure.
Because Howard lives in a world of extreme contrast. There's only perfect or there's horrible. So Lou does well, and he's going into the medical profession.
Yep.
And I'm going to Boston University. What are the odds that Howard, who underperforms, is also going to, out of all the colleges that are in the New York area and Northeast, I'm also going to Boston University. Isn't that a little odd? I suspect that Howard made his academic plans based on Lou's academic plans. I mean,
certainly
down to, obviously, I need to be in your dorm, in your floor, in your room, in the bed next to you.
Right, and I think Lou took pity on him, and that's why he agreed to have him as a roommate. And if I'm not, I got to recall correctly because I may be wrong. Correct me on this if I am. Didn't he have a roommate and it didn't work out? The other guy thought he was a weirdo or vice versa. And
no, I don't think he gave it a second. I don't think he gave it any chance. I think he just said, I think this guy's weird. I need to go be in your room.
That was it. Okay, that was
something along those lines.
I think he was lusting after Lou, to be honest with you.
Oh,
I think
definitely. I think he was in that room while Lou is having sex with girls. Howard's imagining being Honey West.
Yes. And we have that audio. We can play. I can dig that one up too, as well, actually, because it dovetails right into that chapter in Private Parts. I know we're covering Colford, but we're really covering that history of Howard Stern as colored by the Colford book, which is based on actual research, and the Grimm's fairy tales, which is Private Parts. So let's continue
we're in a lot of ways giving the footnotes to this book that would make this book 10 feet
pretty
tall.
Much.
If you say,
right, So if you were waiting for the audio book of Howard's life, you're getting it now, and you don't have to actually go to Barnes and Noble for the audio.
They were like, "Oh, that's cute," and I'm sitting there on a bed because in those rooms it looked like a jail cell. The girls' dormitory. You had a bed on one side and a bed on the other side, and Lou's the bed where Lou is sitting. There's so many girls on the bed that the bed is starting to collapse. My bed was fine.
Nobody came to sit on your bed?
And I love Lou, don't get me wrong, but, it
we know
did lead to some jealousies. I'd be like, no offense. I know Lou very well. He's my friend since fourth grade. He's not brimming with personality. I mean, don't these girls see I have some personality too?
It's interesting because James Santiago and I just covered the Dr. Lou was pissed at me clip for Patreon, and we did about an hour and change about how he was pissed off that Lou called him out for not thanking him for participating in the history of Howard Stern. And he said, wait a minute, I had to look at it from perspective. I said, maybe I should look at it from his perspective. We thought 20 years of therapy, it clearly has worked.
Yeah.
Right. It took, and just imagine this was one of maybe 1,000, maybe 1 million interactions with people, not the least of which his own children, where he's had to, it's him first, everybody else second, or a distant 100th. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm looking even at his 2003 post in that guest book. Even in 2003, he points out, Lou Weinstein is still my friend, and I met him when I was 9 at Wellmet. And this is all one sentence with no punctuation. Lou Weinstein is still my friend, and I met him when I was 9 at Wellmet, and I called him right away to tell him about this website, period. Lou is a very successful eye surgeon, and if you need LASIK, ... look him up. Anyway,
so this is another thing he can't get right. He says he knew Lou since the 2nd grade. Then he says he's knew him since the 4th grade. Then he says, I know him from camp. Which is it? I know exactly where I met every single one of my best friends. I could tell you almost the day and the year. Yeah. I know the year. I know where it was.
I have a picture of him and Dr. Lou together somewhere in Miss America.
It would be the 2010
no, this is them at 13.
At the restaurant. Okay.
This is them at age 13.
Okay.
And it says, my future college roommate Lou and I at 13 years old. So I don't know if they had known each other for 4 years at that point. And I suspect Lou is one of the guys who Howard beat off at age 13.
Oh, yeah. Maybe.
Yeah. Anyhow, if I see anything interesting about Lou in here while we're listening, I'll read it out to you.
Okay. The next clip is called A Pelican with Ambition.
In keeping with the nature-loving spirit of Wellmet, they gazed at Mount Rushmore and rose at sunrise to hike the Grand Canyon. In addition to the panoramic views, his companions also never lost sight of Howard's by now outspoken intention to succeed as a disc jockey. He was hell-bent on a career, Preston remembered. We'd say, take the needle out of your arm, Howie, you're hallucinating. One morning while he was shaving, he stopped and he said to me, I'm going to be the biggest DJ in New York. You wait and see. He was a goof, but he was passionate about it.
So, yeah, and that's the in the history of Howard Stern, he talks a lot. They do talk a little bit about it as well. And I think we might have played some of it in previous episodes. If not, I've got the clip somewhere. You were going to say if you found something, did you happen to find something?
No, I didn't. Nothing worth adding in here.
Okay, so this is next part. Ellen Fuckerman breaks it all down. Plus, enter Allison. I know, such an unfortunate surname.
At BU, Ellen Fuckerman had a similar encounter with his
He added a syllable.
He did. Led Zeppelin.
The medium. He knew that disc jockeys were a dime a dozen, and he said, I've got to do something different and outrageous in the business, Fuckerman recalled. We agreed that most stuff on the radio sucked, but he was determined to succeed at it. If you're going to make money, he said, you've got to go out and do something different. Howard knew where he wanted to go, and he had drive. Meanwhile, Howard's self-esteem received a badly needed lift. He met Allison Burns through a mutual friend in their junior year. She was studying social work.
And what's omitted from that is about Allison's background a little bit. And actually, I found it funny because it's not really mentioned very often. But it says here, her father, Robert Burns, was president of Pullman Vacuum Sweeper Company in Boston. She was studying social work. We know about the social work, but it sounds like her father, she wasn't deprived by any means. If her dad had his own company and a vacuum company, Jesus. So the Allison thing, as you watch the movie Private Parts, again, it may as well be Battlefield Earth for all the reality that's involved. And funny enough, starring Scientologist John Travolta, who also has his issues coming out. And as opposed to T.M. Howard, who has trouble coming out. Dr. Lou also remembers the whole romance, the whirlwind romance, completely different, and you're going to hear that in a clip as well.
Glad you have that. I was going to bring that up.
So here's the clip.
During the King Schmaltz Bagel Hour experience, Howard started dating a fellow BU student who would change his life forever. Her name was Allison Burns. Dr. Lou recalls the pair's first meeting.
We were freshmen in college, and we had a mutual friend. Her name was Elise, and she was going to school, I think in Ohio, and she was transferring to Boston, or Allison was going to school somewhere else and transferring back, and they were
okay, a little more.
We're friends. And so she came up to visit us. We were roommates as freshmen, and that's where he met Allison the first time. I don't think that first meeting was much of anything. I think that later on, when they got together, it became a very intense relationship. And that was about 2 years later. Everybody's got their memory of it. I just remember the freshman year meeting, which was in our room. There was no rain. And, the bells didn't go off for anybody, I don't think, at that meeting.
So it sounds to me that the real bullshit is, of course, the Private Parts, the book bullshit, and the movie that they met, and she floored him and all this shit. Because if he went the following year in his junior year to Wellmet and tried to fuck counselors and was a coxman and asked Woody Belkin and all that horse shit, then they clearly weren't a serious item until later.
Right.
Yeah. If they were.
And how was Allison going to floor him if he was already with the model on campus?
Exactly. So now we're going into, I think this is WRNW, and you're going to hear a little bit more of so-called his recollections of what Allison thought he was like.
Howard and Allison clicked. A romance was born. After they graduated in 1976, Howard returned home to Rockville Center, and Allison went to Columbia University in New York City to pursue a master's degree in social work.
Okay, now there's a little bit cut out here, and that's at the top of the page on 33 if you guys are following along. Allison thought it was the biggest asshole in the world, he later told Rolling Stone. But after more than 2 years of flunking romantic relations and given beautiful Allison's a willingness to converse with the loser that he felt himself to be, Howard became determined to get something going between them. Okay, so this is, and then the next part. First, as part of a class assignment, Howard was enrolled in the Broadcasting Film Division of the School of Public Communications. He convinced Allison to appear in a movie he was making about transcendental meditation. Later, she agreed to join him on a date, going to see the movie Lenny, in which Dustin Hoffman starred as Lenny Bruce, the tortured stand-up who, like Howard himself years later, had faced repeated government censure as he sought to extend the boundaries of comedic taste. And then you hear that audio clip of him and Allison. Now, he mentions TM in the Colford book says TM, and of course this book follows the book Private Parts in terms of when it was released. And Howard says it was about TM, but Ivan Reitman decides, we'll say Betty Thomas, but really let's say Ivan Reitman, decides we're going to make it in the film. He made a film about Jesus, and like I said about our buddy James, James figures, well, it was just to make him seem more. Probably to make him seem more rebellious or some kind of like, ooh, you're making a film about Jesus. That's more controversial. If you talk about TM, it makes you sound like a kook. If the film is about what's essentially a cult, and again, not to disrespect anybody who's doing it, but that's it doesn't seem as edgy, I suppose.
It is weird that, I've mentioned before that Howard's being Jewish is downplayed in the movie. Private Parts like crazy, down to even him making movies about Jesus.
Yeah.
So TM was obviously a huge part of Howard's life, even though Ray had only been into it for herself for maybe a year or so at that point. Mm-hmm. But if you look at Howard's childhood bedroom, he had a framed picture of the Maharishi. And obviously he goes, we'll talk later about where he lives. But TM was a big part of his life. I'm curious about what his movie on TM would have been in, actually.
Yes, and I don't know that I don't know that it exists outside of the story of it. You said that there might have been some audio played on the air.
There is audio in the history. Yeah, in the history of Howard Stern, there is audio of this echoey feedback thing. Howard was really into that back then. So in the commercials that he would cut for King Schmaltz, there's this echoey feedback thing, and it was just him going slowly like Jesus.
Yeah, a lot of reverb. But that sounds like something they made for the purposes of the stupid the whole special.
That wouldn't surprise me if they did that.
Yeah. And it actually, one of the people who talks about it says it was about Jesus, but he's clearly thinking about the movie when he's recollecting that. Like you can't. There's again, when you get faulty narrators, this happens. I mean, you've got two sources saying it was about TM, and anyway, regardless, guys, I'm sure it was about TM because he and Colford both have the same recollection about it. And either way, we'll play the rest of this clip.
It was clear that they had a future together. Among the radio stations that Howard contacted for a job after college was WRNW FM, a rock outlet in Briarcliff Manor, a suburb of New York.
And by the way, guys, that was just torn down either 2 years ago or a year ago, and they did a little bit of a background. They did a kind of a look back story in a few radio periodicals, and they contacted all the people that used to work there, and they all had fond memories of it and stuff. Howard's got like mixed feelings about it, but again, the stories of this is one thing that really bothers me. And we talked about it in our private parts, the movie breakdown, that he would have you believe, because he needed to ally himself with punk and rock and whatever, but he knew nothing about music, didn't care about music by his own admission. Yet in the movie, it shows him drumming and not knowing the lyrics to Pinhead, the Ramones, and then drumming out of sync, hopelessly out of rhythm, air drumming. Right. And he would never have played that in those days. And Meg Griffin would tell you the same thing. So again, it's complete revisionist bullshit. And I think a real hardcore fan, if they'd bought the Colford book and read it properly, would have known that. And if they'd listened to Meg Griffin talk about it over the years.
It says that he was repulsed by punk rock. Howard was. In fact, in the history of Howard Stern, Meg Griffin talks about it because Meg was really she was the music director, really into music. She gets a copy of Allison by Elvis Costello and gives it to Howard and says, "You might like this." And he goes, "Oh, I could never play this.
I could never play this."
So, it was like too edgy for him.
Right, like it was death metal.
His taste and his interest in music stopped when the Beatles broke up. And right now, we're talking about 5 or 6 years after the Beatles broke up. He's not interested in, aware of. Isn't that funny that he dreams of being the biggest DJ in New York, not personality driven, because he wasn't a personality
and didn't have one.
A DJ who knew nothing about music, despised music. What was he going to do?
The names he brings up over the years constantly, the Beatles, but again, put a gun to his head and ask him to name 10 Beatles songs, he'd probably have to eat the bullet. Mountain, who actually I agreed with him. I love Mountain, but they were not a big act. Cream, which was, kind of Mountain was Cream light pretty much. And the
Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin, whose concert he bailed on because according to him, they were throwing dynamite into the crowd in the 80s. Call it dynamite. I said it was like Wile E. Coyote, falling into his own trap. And then that's how he loved them so much. He bailed on a concert 3/4 of the way through. And Ted Utz, who was a DJ at Briarcliff at the WRNW at the time, and talks about him in this book as well, went with him to that concert. So I guarantee it was a promo ticket that they didn't pay a dime.
And in radio is such a small world that Ted Utz ends up being the, I guess, general manager at the station John DeBella is working at. While he and Howard were in their little war with each other, and was saying, "This is not. I don't know who this is. This is not the person I knew.
Yes,
this new Howard. I don't know who this is."
Right. So,
Donald J. Barnett, who doubled as general manager and program director, interviewed him and liked what he heard on his tape. Besides Howard's college training and first-class FCC license, he had brief professional experience at WNTN AM in Newton. Barnett called to offer work not long afterward. Howard cited other commitments and declined. Privately, Howard was unsure of his talent and uncertain about the radio business. In making the rounds of radio stations in search of a job, he had come across has-beens from New York radio who now toiled in out-of-town obscurity. He submitted to this insecurity. He took a couple of safer positions, including an entry-level opportunity with the New York advertising agency of Benton and Bowles. Only after Allison and his parents noticed what he himself felt gnawing at him, that he had made a boneheaded detour from the radio career he wanted, did Howard reverse himself and phone Barnett for a second chance. Howard got the chance to prove himself when Barnett needed another broadcaster for Christmas morning.
There's a little bit of Howard's history that's left out, including his, he talks about it every now and then. He used to go and try to sell ads to, Chinese restaurants and stuff to advertise. And he talks about briefly doing something for some pornography. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
From pornographer?
Yes.
But as far as the Benton and Bowles thing goes, I'm almost certain, and I forget where I've learned this, might be the history of Howard Stern, that it was Ben Stern who got Howard the job there. And Howard talks about bursting into tears because he was so in over his head. He didn't understand when they just asked him, okay, do this and do this. And he didn't understand what his task was and burst into tears. And he also talks about the fact that he just, whenever he decided to go back after being convinced by Allison and his parents to go back to radio, he didn't inform his employers that he was leaving. He just was a no-show.
Which is just exactly what Robin did with her first job, I believe.
Right. Yeah. And so it's funny that in Private Parts, he is painted as a guy who is exceedingly loyal to his employers.
Yeah. Right.
And that is exactly the opposite of who he is.
For sure. And what it also will, I think there will be a bit of overlap, guys. He didn't know about music, and he would basically try to listen to the other disc jockeys to copy what they were doing. And it's, again, there's no shame in admitting the reason why last episode people were a little excessively hard on us, even fans of our show were saying, you guys were a little tough on him considering, his college radio, King Biscuit Bagel Hour, King Schmaltz Bagel Hour, sorry. And that was his first time. No. We weren't being hard on him for being bad. We're being hard on him because he claimed this was some kind of watershed moment in his career, and that it was so edgy and so amazing and so life-changing. Even though he'll tell you as well, he was the weak link in the history of Howard Stern. He was the weak link in the team. He went on and talked about all the this street cred it gave him for being fired when he wasn't fired. You don't get fired from a job you didn't have. It wasn't a job.
I saw those comments, some of those comments that you're talking about, and I didn't comment on them, but I disagree with them. You do see signs in someone at that age that they have something. I mean, Eddie Murphy was 19 when he joined SNL's cast. Chris, all of these comedians talk about how they were young kids when they got up on stage and started doing stand-up. Dave Chappelle and so on. So even if he's not fully cooked, you see that he's got the right ingredients.
That's
Howard
right.
Had none of that. And one thing I wanted to point out, this was not Howard's first time doing radio, if you're to believe him. If you're to believe him, he had been doing radio shows since he was 5.
Yes.
So he had 13, 14, 15 years of practice at this point, if you're to believe him. So, he should. What I'll tell you, when I was in film school, and because I had a video camera in my teens, I had a leg up on the kids who were just now starting to try things for their very first time. So if he had a recording suite in his basement, thanks to his father,
which he did
have. And all of this, he had a huge leg up. So he there should have been some signs of the Howard Stern.
It's like the comedian's perfect example. The Kevin Pollak talked about it. memorized the Bill Cosby. A lot of them memorized Bill Cosby albums and did them in front of their other students, so they were getting comfortable on the mic. They could be, and that's pretty much how they got started. You rip off people. Jay Thomas talked about it as well. He wasn't a stand-up, but he ripped off old bits and did them as his own, and that got him gave him the stones to perform in front of people. Howard never at any point has faith in his own ability, because he has none, and he'll tell you about it. But then he had no personality, and that's one key point that gets repeated by all the jocks at WRNW. He went in shapeless, formless, personality-wise, nothing, no color, no opinions. He was a straight conservative. He wanted to be one of those guys at 107.2 and talking about the Doobie Brothers here on Kicks FM.
And he naively thought that he would be singled out as the voice of New York, being the guy who just does the same intros as everyone else.
Right.
But it's funny. He acknowledges that for the stuff that he would play on his radio show, he just copied whatever everybody else was doing. If they're doing it, I'll do it. And that's the extent he'll ever admit to copying other DJs. He'll never say, I listened to tapes of Steve Dahl and just copied it, which is what he did do. But he will say, I just, because music's not important. I just copied whatever music they played.
Yep.
It was a stressful initiation. The inferior equipment failed him soon after he went on the air.
Oh, I should preface this. So this is the part that's missing in the audio. As Christmas 1976 approached, Barnett agreed to host WRNW's morning show on the holiday itself so that the regular host could spend the day with his family. But New York station WKTU-FM, where Barnett was a part-time disc jockey, asked him to broadcast there on Christmas morning. What to do? WKTU, it says here, it was a soft rock station that called itself the Mellow Sound, evolved 2 years later into Disco 92, and eventually became WXRK or K-Rock, Howard's home base since 1985. A little bit of trivia. WKTU, a union shop, paid much better than WRNW, and Barnett believed that he would undermine his standing if he turned down the Christmas shift. I went to my list of people for our WRNW, and Howard was first on the list, Barnett recalled. I called him, and he jumped at the chance to come in that day. If it meant getting away from family, sure. And maybe, the opportunity to get on the air, sure.
He was unable to turn off the microphone, which also meant that he could not easily cue up the records he wanted to play without putting those sounds on the air as well.
And then it says, like an inexperienced pilot calling the control tower for emergency instructions on how to land the rickety plane. Think Airplane, the movie, guys, and all the sweat pouring off the guy's face, like Niagara Falls. The panicky Stern phoned Barnett at WKTU. I tried to suggest what he might do to cut the mic, but he was unable to restore the speaker in the studio. So when I told him to call the chief engineer at home, Barnett remembered. So Howard woke up the guy New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Well, Christmas morning.
Christmas morning, yeah.
Yeah, according to
how
Howard
am I supposed to cue up my next Beatles song if I can't mute the microphone?
Yeah, you think he would have picked up something from Ben at the going into the studio all those years, and seeing and having his own, as you said, his own recording deck at home.
Or that he would just play the whole album because he's lazy and uncreative.
Yeah.
Put on the Beatles album, let it go, then flip sides and let it go.
Right. Play one Allman Brothers cut from live at the Fillmore East and just have fun with it and go take a shit.
The Christmas hassle was not held against him. Barnett found the 22-year-old Howard to be reliable and professional, and he gave Howard a steady amount of work at the farm league rate of $4 an hour.
The quote was, some people became hard to control, but I don't ever recall having a problem with Howard. And then we get into the lovely quote about money, which I know you fucking loathe when he brings this up.
Howard
this is
4-hour air shift.
No, I want to hear this. Yeah, sorry.
WRNW was a 3,000-watt FM toilet bowl, Howard said later. But WRNW became an extremely rare and valuable radio environment. He was encouraged to be inventive. He also vented some of the adolescent obsessions that would help earn him a large and receptive audience in the years that followed.
So he had a 24-hour work week, 4-hour shifts, 6 days a week, $4 an hour. And 96, we did the interest calculator, or the inflation calculator thing, and it was part-time work, and that's all he did. He never mentioned in any source that he did other radio work elsewhere.
Yeah, and minimum wage at that time was $2.30 an hour. So $4 is he's making almost double minimum wage.
Right.
And his salary that was about $5,000 a year, which is what Ben Stern was paying for his education. Also,
yes,
$5,000 a year. But I also want to point out that this whole $96 a week thing, that only lasts for about 7 months before his salary more than doubles. I think it goes up to 2.4 times what he's making in a matter of like 7 months.
Right. When he takes over as program director and still maintains an air shift, he gets paid something like $12,000 for the year, according to the book. And so, in one of the books anyway. So here is the next clip, Descriptions of WRNW. It's a short clip.
Conditions did not come much more primitive than what Howard encountered when he started work at the end of 1976. At the same time, the Spartan setup exerted its own funky charm. The remote location was in a countrified setting, and the owners were rarely around to stiffen the laid-back operation. The choice conditions allowed a bunch of enthusiastic longhairs to enliven the airwaves with an eclectic assortment of rock sounds.
According to the other jocks, they had something like 10,000 LPs there. 10,000 is enormous by any standards. So there's no shortage of music there if you wanted to play anything, and I'm sure it was extremely diverse.
And if you really love music, you can't believe your luck if you go into this and there are 10,000. I mean, that's a library.
You'd be in heaven. Yeah. That's one iPod classic. So we go with WRNW, some faulty memories from other staffs. So this is continuing that.
Well, my first radio job really was WRNW in Westchester, and that was a very difficult situation for me. I was not a good broadcaster.
Costello in the background?
Not a good straight broadcaster. And I wasn't thought of much.
I think at most radios.
Ironic. They're playing Elvis
Costello.
Elvis Costello, the same thing he wouldn't play on the air.
Never
suggested. That's ironic.
I always get annoyed when he says, "I wasn't a good straight broadcaster." You're not a good straight anything.
No,
but this whole straight broadcaster thing.
Wrong word to use.
What if he's not a straight broadcaster, then what kind of broadcaster is he? What's the opposite of straight broadcaster in his mind?
Gay.
Yeah, and that's obvious. But I guess zookeeper. I don't know. What's the opposite of straight broadcaster?
What he was a warm body. Now maybe not so much, a warm body they could throw in the air, and he was lucky to do it at a time when you could fuck up and fail upwards, because in a modern setting, well, first of all, the state of radio is nothing to speak of, but we've often talked about if he decided to do a Rogan and make his current podcast into a paid podcast and go on the metric of how many people he has on Patreon or Anchor or whatever podcast thing you're using, or if you went on YouTube and just broadcast his show live and you saw the real numbers and allowed them to be seen, he would be in the fetal position and he'd die of embarrassment.
Yeah, well, he couldn't do that now anyway because Sirius has the exclusive rights to his archive. He wouldn't even be able to put his archive there. So he would only have his however many shows he's going to do that year. And if he's not contractually obligated to do that many, and it's only by his own momentum that he does them, he's not doing them.
No, God, no. And I mean, what any successful show that you see out there now, what's the one thing they have in common? They're regular, they're dependable, they're entertaining, and they deliver on promises. So he wouldn't be able to, and the amount of time that he took off this last year, like I'm sure you were amazed, because normally it's 112 shows and then 97. I think it ended up being 97. There was a deficit of about 3 weeks.
I don't know. I know Gary Puppet on Twitter said it was in the 80s, not even 97, but in the 80s.
According to Raven, according to her calculations, and she's our QF abacus, she said 97, which
I believe
reversed is 79, which makes perfect sense. Which we both think maybe Jennifer Vitz is on our team, and it was there was an extra 3 weeks of vacation shoved in the summer. So when he went away, it was a huge furor amongst the 6 listeners he still has. That all go on Reddit with their 12 different accounts, each of them,
and people understand. Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, please.
I was going to say, people understand that Howard is a numerologist, a narcissistic numerologist. So he chose 112 because his birth date is 112. His production company's 112. He's got he had the tattoo of his Capricorn. His birth date is everything to him. So is 97 the IQ that the SAT score equivalent to his IQ, or how did he land on something like that?
It was 99 in the Inc.com article. But 97 is pretty close. But we've got to figure that it was forced on him because of the pay cut as well. Carrie and I did a Marbles episode, which is really, I think, one of our best. And I keep referencing it. Every successive contract people would get at Sirius came with a 40 to 60% pay cut, wage cut each year. So the M&M contract, the Oprah contract, they get a big, the initial one is the big one. The second one, even though people were saying, oh, it was 80 million, it might not have even been 40 million or 50 million. Hence a lot of the cutbacks. And then when he gets into 2015, 2016 contract, it's even less. So it would be 50 or 40%, 60% of that contract. When you get into the fourth contract, you don't even have enough money to keep Beth in Lucky Charms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
she's doing store brand.
Yeah, pretty much.
Those numbers are never credible. No one will ever admit to being the person who gave those numbers. So it's not like, we spoke to Jennifer Witz and she tells us that he's now making 90 million. Those numbers are always anonymously shared. And from Howard's camp, they're not going to be Sirius isn't going to go and scare their board by saying we are going to give him $90 million, even though we could give him $12. He has nowhere else to go. We have his archives.
Well, yeah, in 2010, it was all the analysts agreed it was a number they allowed Stern to press release so he doesn't lose face. Yes. Because there's just no way he's getting 120 million for this contract. Or the 120 million this last one was only because Rogan signed for 100 million for Spotify.
Yeah. And if you don't think that saving face is part of Howard's negotiations, look no further than the AGT farewell video. So it could seem like Howard was leaving on top of the world. He had finally found the dancing dog act he had hoped he would find, and now I'm off to explore other opportunities. No, Simon Cowell, they had already established, you're out of here, Howard.
Yeah.
The leak. The leak revealed they wanted him gone with a year. I think it was 2.5 years left in his contract.
Yes.
So anyway, saving face is that's a big thing for him. And that number that they always throw out there, some articles will be honest enough to say that this includes everything associated, every staffer, every utility, every rent. Everything is bundled into this. So if it relates to Howard Stern in any way, then it comes out of this budget. But that's not his salary.
No. And the other thing is, of course, that if you want to look at Dan from Illinois, the lawyer from Illinois, who busted his balls after he got on AGT and claimed, he said, you got a pay cut. He goes, how do you know? I got a raise. How do you figure? Well, I'm working fewer days a year, but I got a raise. And he goes, well, how do you know? I look at my paycheck. Oh, you mean if you're getting fewer hours and you're not making 100 million, you're making 80 million or 60 or 70, then you got a wage cut. No, there's no nice way of looking at it.
And I'll tell you that a devious mind like that would also say, actually, I still am getting a raise. I'm saying fewer words per hour.
Yes.
I sit quietly while my staff talks.
Right.
Or I say fewer new words per hour. I redo the show I did yesterday, which I've already been paid for, and I just redo it. A devious mind like Howard's will be telling himself always, "You're scamming them."
Right. It's his own. It's wiggy math.
You're always aware as the staff of DJs when a new DJ has arrived, because the natural thing in radio is for people to feel somewhat threatened. There's a newcomer, and is he or she going to get so good that they might take my job? Maybe there was some of that. I don't remember Howard being very pushy toward seeing to it that he introduced himself to everybody. I think that he was probably just as much a loner in those days as I was, really. I think a lot of people that get into radio are loners, and that's why we do it.
So he painted the image of they were adversarial because he was such a dork and he was an outsider, and they were cool because they liked cool music. And she's saying it was the exact opposite. He didn't come up forward. He was shy. He was retiring, and didn't blend. He didn't blend well. He was just he was the background. He was a wallpaper, and he had no personality. And again, he has to be the victim. He was shunned as a guy on dating in, Boston University. Now he's shunned at his first radio job. He's always got to be a victim.
Unmistakable presence because he's really big. And I think that he felt maybe, I can only guess, I don't know, we didn't talk much. I think that he felt maybe a little uncomfortable around us, and because, as he admits so humorously on the air, how insecure so many of the years of his life were, that maybe he felt that insecurity, or that we were judging him or thinking he wasn't cool because we were all into punk and hanging at CBGBs or whatever. And none of that was really the case. We were all just trying to keep our jobs done because we all had
a little more.
80 jobs for $4 an hour to stay employed there.
When Howard came into it, he was a new guy, and he was really in love with his girlfriend, and he was just so happy to be there. He was so happy to be on the radio. It was just such a love for him, and that kind of energy is great. I mean, it's nice to have that energy around.
Okay, well, a little less, but 15 seconds, guys.
The fact that he was kind of an odd duck at first just made it kind of funny. But, he was earnest, he was hardworking, and he was absolutely committed to doing radio. Why else are you there for $96 a week for 70 hours a week, which we were all doing?
Okay, now, so that's, yes, exactly. So $90 a week, $96 a week, but these people were doing other shifts elsewhere wherever they could. He wasn't. He never, ever mentions that.
It was 24 hours a week, not 70.
Sorry, 24 hours a week. But they were all doing massive hours wherever they could to supplement their income. He was still living at home.
Yeah. Well, and soon he was going to be living in the
monastery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next clip is called Ben Chimes In, Meg Talks Equipment, and More Ramones Revisionist Bullshit.
Ben Stern.
After he got out of college, I felt his education, as far as radio is concerned, was not finished. So there was a newspaper that came out, from the industry, where the guys would be voice teachers, and I had him contact. I knew this guy, so I had him go there and contact the guy, and the guy was very honest. He says, "You're all right." He says, "But I'll give you a real voice teacher." And Howard did go to this woman who was a voice teacher and who helped him a lot. So he pursued it from that angle, and then I would have discussions with him, but
Okay, and if you want to hear, guys, this is a radio promo from 1977 that'll open in another player, and this is him doing exactly what I mentioned. So just one sec. Let's see if I can get this correct.
Hi, I'm Howard Stern, the program director of Westchester's Rock Station. It's really hard to describe what makes a radio station a success. We here at WRNW have narrowed it down to a very few special elements. First and foremost, the music.
Steely Dan, which trashes Gary for liking.
Yes, and it just sounded exactly like, "Hi, this is Sal Governale."
Yeah.
So it's just amazing how that goes full circle.
Radio 107's music can be described in one catch-all phrase. We just represent the best in today's rock music and the music of years past.
Okay, I'll leave. So that's an example of what he was trying to do back in the day. Yes, post-coaching, absolutely. So we'll continue with what Ben Stern was going on about.
I always said to him, I used the term, you got to have diarrhea of the mouth if you want to be in this business. Because these guys, they come into the studio, they don't stop, on, and it's good, because they really are working at their trade.
I thought if I ever got a job in radio, I needed to go out and be a straight announcer. And that brought me to WRNW. And WRNW, I was the worst announcer, the worst straight announcer. But I needed to learn how to become a straight announcer, and I needed to learn to listen up.
Straight.
Yep. Let's hyper focus, guys.
Because my voice would go, I was so nervous.
Howard's WRNW debut fell on New Year's Day, 1977. His first shift was a disaster.
My first shift, when I get on the air, I was so nervous my hands were shaking. Mm-hmm. The station was empty, thank God, because it was New Year's morning.
Uh-huh.
I hit the button to play the record. The whole board jams up. I must have hit it too hard.
Now, incidentally, guys, when you hear this little interlude where him, Robin, and Artie are in the room, that's not actually on the air. They're not in studio, or if they are, they're recording, but it's not a day's release. This is something they recorded specifically for the special. They threw the statement at him, and they just said, "Okay, we want you to talk about this before the special." And they all stayed. They were they could have been in one of the meeting rooms, for example. And he was recounting this because even all their audio levels are all over the place. Artie sounds a little bit lower, which isn't uncommon, but there's a difference in sound. And
that's an interesting observation.
It wasn't organic because there was a section where they're talking about Kinnison, and then they start playing the old tapes, and all of a sudden they start recounting, but it doesn't sound like it's on the air because there's a definite difference in that sound versus this. You'll hear it when you'll only hear it when you compare. But so this is him recounting, and of course he gets the day wrong.
One thing I want to quickly point out is that every time he recalls what his voice sounded like in the beginning, he always gives all these excuses like, "Oh, I was nervous, so my voice was like this." That's not how your voice sounded. He never goes anywhere near what his voice actually sounded like, which would require him powering down the settings, stopping with the diaphragm exercises, speaking as you normally do, which he won't do. So he always gives just the worst impression of what he actually sounded like. And I always just find that revealing.
So quick question for those in the audience who, for the purposes of people in the audience who want to know, what do you think he does when he, aside from, distinctly lowering his voice on purpose the way I'm doing just to that affectation that he would do besides compression settings, how do you account for talk shows or guest appearances, whatever, on somewhere where he sounds consistent? You have to figure that he's backstage with the mic guys, giving them settings for the way he wants to sound and submitting that as kind of like that's on my what do you call it? Rider. This is if I'm going to do your show, I have to sound like this. That has to be the only answer.
It used to be a trademark of the old satellite days that a person would not believe they were talking to Howard, a caller, because they go, "You don't sound like Howard."
Right.
Because they were hearing a different version of that voice. But, it is anytime you listen to a newscast or a podcast where they want to play for you a clip from Howard's show, I laugh always at how Howard's voice sounds so fake. I mean, you're listening to a normal conversation, and then you hear suddenly a voice that has nothing but digital processing and whatever else is done to it to make it sound. I mean, he's making the lowest sounds, but they're being amplified, and whatever is being done to it. I'm surprised that nobody else ever says, "Whoa, why are his levels so different from everyone else's?" It never comes up. I guess they just buy that that's his voice.
Well, there is a forum. There's an audio forum that I found because I was looking for basically mic settings for Howard Stern. And the guy said that he had been to the studio, and this would have been about 2010, 2011. And he explained there's definitely some effects going on. And the guys in the back, he said the serious people at the time told me what they use. So just the idea, just the concept that there are prescribed settings for his mic, obviously. Well, I mean, there always are. Like, these guys like to sound a certain way, but that there are ways to make him sound different. That means he must need them, because otherwise you would get the most natural sounding mic, as I have done. This is my voice. I don't do anything to it. I have a cloud lifter to increase the gain so that I don't have to actually use my audio interface and get more distortion as a result. That's not changing my voice. That's giving the gain more power artificially and without sacrificing quality. And then a really natural sounding mic, and this is my voice. The guy said he couldn't remember the exact settings, but it's the kind of mic he wants to use, but also settings that are made. But also he admits in one of these clips that he goes, "I probably slowed my voice down." I guarantee at Sirius, he has his voice pitched in such a way that it's slower. It's imperceptibly slower, but it's definitely been altered so that whatever comes out is slower than, normal.
What he meant was that he would record it and then re-record it back playing that tape at a slower speed, so
absolutely
deepen his voice.
Yes.
Yeah. So at the time too, when they would do the radio, they didn't necessarily have to be live on the air. I mean, he could pre-record, especially if they took calls.
Yeah,
that was rarely a live call, and so it'd be between songs. You would hear, you would take the call and then cut it down, and so he could have done all kinds of trickery. But in addition to trickery, I know that he does diaphragm exercises. And this is all just cobbled together from things that he said and let slip over the years.
Oh yeah.
From insightful comments he'll make to high pitch about how you could change your voice. That he wouldn't. Why would he know this? He knows nothing unless it's something that fascinates him.
Right.
So why would he know what tricks you can use? I mean, to drinking hot water as a way to open up your vocal cords. He used to smoke just so that he would have a deeper voice,
a gravelly voice. Yeah.
I mean, he's tried everything, and he's come to the conclusion that just being yourself, suddenly your voice is deep.
Yeah, well,
suddenly your voice is deep.
Yeah, and just also being yourself isn't enough. You have to alter it somehow. The thing is, guys, and if you really want an example, then you go to those red carpet type situations where he's being interviewed while going through somewhere. And the one clip that I always use is, what's a perfect date night for you and Beth? And he goes, about dinner, movie, glass of wine. And then Beth comes on and they do a split screen. All of a sudden it's her and she goes, definitely a bottle of wine. And you hear his voice, but you definitely you can hear him and see him artificially going, So that trick only works so much when you're on a mic that's not your own.
Yeah. You want to hear a really good example is when you hear him going up on stage in front of, so I'm thinking of the Blockbuster VHS award that he accepted for Private Parts, where he goes, I would just like to use my time to make out with Heather Locklear. And it's all diaphragm.
Or the Fartman appearance on MTV.
And exactly the Fartman thing too, where he's doesn't have the studio echo anymore and the booming effects, and he's got to do the gulpy thing. So I always hear gulp whenever I hear him talk. When he's outside of his studio, it always sounds very gulpy to me, like he's trying to create an air bubble in his throat to make his voice sound deeper. And I think that's from this coaching that Ben Stern paid for.
Yep.
107 FM WRNW. I'm Howard Stern with you each and every day.
That's not how it sounded either.
For Tuesday. 107 FM, the Ramones. Gabba gabba wee, gabba gabba gay, gabba 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 gabba.
So that was from Private Parts. They just took the audio from the movie and they cobbled up the two scenes. One was at Boston University where he supposedly dropped a bunch of 8 tracks on an LP on the deck. And then the Ramones shit is at Briarcliff Manor at WRNW. And again, guys, he would never play the fucking Ramones in a million years. And the only reason he had when he did have the Ramones on, it was because they were at war with each other, and they'd been at war with each other since the late 70s, since they pretty much started, or around 1980. Joey's girlfriend slept. Johnny stole Joey's girlfriend, and that's the KKK took my baby away is all about that. It's a great song.
And at the time, I mean, that was one of the biggest celebs he could have gotten, probably, as a tired Joey Ramone. Welcome to my nightmare.
Well, yeah. And he certainly didn't care about the music, and that's kind of the whole point. Why would you portray yourself as a rock DJ with the Dee Snider look and all this shit, but not know anything about the music?
Yeah, it's appearing to be interested in something is very important to him.
Absolutely.
Appearing to be Saturday Night Live's biggest fan, even though he would never watch Saturday Night Live.
Sure.
It's very important to him. Yeah. Appearing to care about fashion, even though he knows nothing and cares nothing about fashion, is important to him.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I called this guy New Year's morning to tell him I can't get I can't change records. The record's running out and I don't know what to do. And the guy hung up the phone and goes, call the engineer. Don't bother me. You just woke me up New Year's Day. It was my one day off.
You can't win for losing.
You should have heard this radio show. What a train wreck it was. You have no friggin' idea. I couldn't change records. I couldn't go from.
He could change records. He just couldn't shut the fucking mic off, and that's what Colford explained.
So they would just hear him in the background flipping the thing over.
Yeah, or taking the thing out of the sleeve, etc. Yeah.
One record to another.
So what did you do?
The engineer came in, started yelling at me. This big fat guy, and he fixed it at some point, I guess.
While the show is going on.
And all the other jocks heard me, and they think I was horrible. I was the laughing stock of the station. The program director was going to fire me, I heard, because I woke him up.
Uh-huh.
And again, I had to beg for his mercy. I said, I'm so sorry.
Well, as it turned out, he pressed 2 buttons at once, and he wasn't supposed to, and that's how he screwed it up.
I was going to say, you're not the laughing stock because there was something wrong with the equipment. It's because there's something wrong that you did. That you needed laughing stock.
Totally.
Oh, she's terrible. You're horrible.
Oh, God.
It's a miracle I sit here today.
But this New Year's Day, what year? Like, see, I'd love to know the year. You don't remember stuff like that.
1977.
70 New Year's Day. So that's officially when you first signed on, sort of.
Yeah.
Like on the real.
Yeah. And it was awful.
Same thing for me the first time I was on, sort of. I just couldn't put the mic up loud enough. I was afraid to bring the pot up so that people would be able to hear me, and then friends started to call.
That was Meg Griffin, guys, once again.
And saying, Meg, you sound great, which wasn't true, but you gotta, turn the pot up. We can't hear you, you know? Well, the equipment was not high-tech, and it was rarely, if ever, replaced. I mean, our checks bounced when, if you didn't get to the bank fast enough. So if the board screwed up on him, I think it probably wasn't his fault. Give him the benefit of the doubt, but I was not a witness.
He was a caricature of what an FM DJ would sound like. He had a perfectly normal voice, which he uses now, but back then it was WR.
Okay, gonna let them play out, guys.
NW.
This is Howard Stern. Good morning to you. Everybody at WRNW. Here's Jody Mitchell. He was kind of being in a relaxed FM studio, but his voice was somewhat high. And he wasn't. And the rest of us were a little bit more, let's see, I don't know if high is the right word, but we were more energized than he was.
I was just surprised that anybody who had been hired there, who had a desire to be on FM radio playing rock and roll records, seemed to be that conservative, which I just couldn't understand that at that point in my life, because FM radio and Scott Muni and
okay, a little more
NEW and protesting against the war and all the way up to punk and everything like that, to me that was what sort of defined our existence and dissent. And Howard seemed to be the opposite of that. So I remember that. I remember thinking that, boy, we have somebody really conservative in our midst.
Which is ironic because it's not ironic. It's funny because there was a complete cultural overturn in the late 70s with punk. Came with it like a whole new genre of music, the same way he adopted grunge 4 years after it had broke and adopted the look. He's never timely with anything. He was never going to play the Sex Pistols. He was never going to play Magazine or Suicide, or he was never going to play Devo or the Buzzcocks or anything, or Elvis Costello. Let's say like more mild type of punk at the time, or Blondie, bands at the time that were actually making waves. And then new wave, yeah, absolutely, because it was all about him. He didn't give a fuck about the music. He just wanted to be popular. That's all it was. And it's such a shallow ambition when you consider. I showed you privately. There's a documentary out. It's on Amazon Prime, I think, and I'm going to rent it actually because it looks good. It's called "What I Am, What I Play," and it's about Charles Laquidara, Meg Griffin. It follows 4 DJs and this guy from Toronto, this Marsden, Mark Marsden. I can't remember his name. I wasn't a radio guy at the time, so I don't know. But there were 4 people that they go after, and they just talk about the how radio changed and what happened. I think it's about 90 minutes, and it looks really good. So I Am What I Play.
Charles was the Boston guy. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah. And so they and Howard gets a mention. You hear him mentioned here and there, of course. But he does a little voiceover that they managed to get for the purposes of Meg's CV, and it's from the same video that I clipped for this show, but I didn't know there was a documentary because I wasn't looking at the graphic. I was just waiting for the audio to start, not looking at it. And she says the same thing. He was very conservative. He wanted the gig. and that would have been like Mr. Rock and Roll doesn't want to actually play rock and roll.
It had to be baffling because here you are in your 20s and you get a job, but it's not a real job, and that you're not stressed out.
Yes.
I mean, you could be. You could be stressed out if you're intimidated to go on the air. But these guys want to be on the air.
Yes,
but
and it's a learning
it's not
ground.
It's not physically demanding. It comes with a little bit of notoriety. I mean, we'll get to it a little bit later, but if you please the advertisers, they'll send you stuff, or they'll ask you to come and DJ at the club, which is different then than it is now, DJing at the club.
For sure.
But, it definitely had its perks.
Yes.
And it had to be very baffling to these guys when FM radio meant something and AM radio meant something, and they were very different.
Yes.
And it would be like if you had a hip hop radio station and in comes a guy wearing a cowboy hat and a vest, and you go, wait a minute, are you sure you want to be here? That's as shocking as it was when Howard came in to these guys.
Absolutely.
Wait a minute, who is this guy that is nothing like the music that we play, the people who listen to our station? He's nothing like any of them. What is he doing here? I think that's hard to appreciate in our today.
Yeah, for certain. And the other thing is the idea of him having to change his image at all is a little baffling to me, except that he wanted that, of course, that mainstream acceptance. And what's mainstream at the time? Well, in the 80s, it was hair metal. So he decided he was going to go with that. And he decided the image it mattered, when in fact, look at all those radio guys. None of them look like rock and rollers. They all look like tubby white guys.
Right.
And, except when hip hop, just some black guy, playing hip hop tunes. They might have been overweight because it's a sedentary job. It's not like you're running around in the studio on a treadmill doing your show.
And by nature, it's not visual. So your look isn't what defines you.
No, of course not. And if you made it to a concert and you were going to announce, let's say you were going to MC or host a band, introduce them at some function that's based around the radio station, like the Jingle Ball, for example, they would often get the local DJs, the DJs of the station, to go do stuff in between. Acts, if there were multi-acts, if like a concert bill, or the opening act and blah, blah, blah. And so he was so hung up on his image that he wasn't hung up enough to do the research on the music and at least be a proper poser. He wanted the image. That was way more important than the music. I think it's very telling.
I was a teenager in the 90s, and back then independent record stores were a big deal. Independent music stores were a big deal.
Sure.
And when you're a teenager in the 90s and you're trying out new bands for the first time and you're going into an independent store, you feel judged by the people.
Yes.
You walk in going like,
oh yeah,
are they asking themselves, why don't you already own this album? You're not cool, or you're trying this. And so anyway, that kind of feeling of judgment must have been going on with Howard when these guys go, Howard. You don't know who Elvis Costello is? You don't know who these guys are?
Right.
So why are you here? Why would you want to work at an independent music store when you have no interest in music? That's what these guys must have been going through.
Well, don't you remember the kind of fun of going and looking at the new releases and you see, the latest Mary's Danish album, and some guy looking at it go, oh, I got the first one. Have you heard that? Is that any good? And all these conversations that would happen from other patrons, you had no idea who they were. Like a lot of them. Yeah. And they'd start up conversations. Oh, that's a great album, man. I just got that last week or 2 months ago. It's totally worth it. And then listening trays. They would allow you to listen when CDs became big. CD players littered the store with headphones where you could actually play the music. And then, they eventually maybe if you're lucky, they'll sell the demo because they don't want to, it's not selling well. So you get a cheaper copy.
With my first job, most of my paycheck, I bet you, went to CDs.
Same.
Which were very expensive back then,
Oh yeah.
It would be 5 hours worth of work to buy a CD. Basically.
I was lucky enough. A pawn shop opened up and they were selling CDs at $5 a pop. Used CDs. Okay.
Yeah, you were.
And a university town where these idiots would buy all the college bands and get, I don't want to hear, like, they didn't even listen to the fucking thing. They just got it to be cool, paid the $14.99 or $19.99, offloaded it for a couple bucks. And I would literally walk out of the pawn shop with about $50 worth of CDs of like 10 CDs for $50. I was in hog heaven.
Yep, I remember. Yeah, so you'd hear one song from this band. Yeah. Only a few times because you couldn't call it up on demand with YouTube. You'd hear it one or two times and go, okay, here's the gamble. 5 hours of my labor. I hope this thing's good.
Yeah, well, import albums. Albums used to be a
$35
of money
each. Yeah, $35 each you would pay for a live album that was import.
Bootleg maybe.
Yeah, pressed in Italy, and sent over here with bootleg cover art and everything. I spent a lot of money on those things.
Same.
And it was a huge joy, obviously, to go. I mean, you would go to places, and I lived in the Chicagoland area, not in the city, and you'd go to the city to check out the CD stores and record stores, and
absolutely
CDs. I didn't buy vinyl, and it was a huge. And then even up into my late teens and 20s, the amount of money I would have spent on concerts, which Howard would have been able to go to for free as a DJ.
Yes, I didn't care.
Right. The amount of money that you would spend on pursuing the kind of stuff that Howard had no interest in whatsoever. That's why it's hard to appreciate, I think, unless you pause and go, how weird it must be that you want to be involved in this scene.
Yes.
That so many people are so passionate about and consider you lucky to be involved with, and you don't have any interest in it.
No interest, but also no confidence. And that one feeds the other. If you feel this is such a thing where I've always wanted to be there, you would make the effort normally to go and learn what these bands are about and it's not like he lived in fucking Iowa. He was in New York where he had access to record store after record store after record store to find this stuff. Used bins. LPs would cost because he's going to talk at one point. He says here, I couldn't afford a comedy album. That's the name of the clip.
Oh, Jesus.
Because he said they only had one or two at the station. Used LPs back in the day, anywhere from $4.99 to $7.99, depending if it was a single or double, and loads for a cutout price because they just wouldn't sell, and maybe $10 if it was really like an import or something. Those guys, the people that sold those things, knew what they were worth used, and he had nothing to do but take this money, do the thing, and go home. And he couldn't. He says he couldn't afford to buy a comedy album.
I mean, think about when you're a teenager and you get your license and you're driving with your friends for the first time, and you get to control your playlist in your car, and everyone gets to hear what music you're into, and you're kind of looking in your rearview mirror, going, "Oh, okay, are they aware that they're hearing something good right now?" Whatever.
Yeah.
That's something that a true music lover would go through, and
totally.
It really is something that's mind-boggling.
You're maybe turning people on to something new or something great, and you want to see their reaction. Do they think it's as awesome as I do? That kind of thing.
Yeah. You want them to go like, "Oh wow, you got good taste." Right. No one ever said to Howard. I mean, what's he going to do? Say to them, "Have you ever heard of the Beatles?" They're he knows nothing else.
Guys, I brought this Live at Candlestick Park album.
So. I mean, he can claim, I was really close to going to this Jimi Hendrix Live at the Fillmore. I didn't end up going because my friend didn't invite me. To go into how he was traumatized by a neighborhood girl not inviting him. But really, he has nothing to bring to the table that could open up there and make them go, "Oh wow, I never heard of this before. Oh, that's cool. You're into this."
That's right.
Which is unusual if you're in that career.
Everybody was sort of throwbacks to, the hippie radio thing where sex, drug, and rock and roll was before it was a bad thing. And Howard was not of that stripe. He was completely different. He was very withdrawn. He was very insecure. He just had an absolute passion for radio. And it was the one gig he could get. And he was looking to fit in. And it wasn't easy to come into a clique like that had been well established, especially if you weren't one of them, So it wasn't easy.
I don't know about that because, we're getting conflicting reports from even his fellow jocks. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't know, it was easy for him because, he couldn't fit in. But then Meg's saying, well, no, he didn't try to fit in. He didn't even bother talking.
Yeah, Meg has a reason, I think, to rewrite history and be kind. I think she might have been a serious employee at some point, maybe that point.
She still is, I believe. I think she's got a show on Sirius XM.
Yeah, and then they had worked together again at XRK.
Yes.
So so she could soften the blow more so than somebody who has not spoken to Howard in 30 years at this point.
Oh yeah,
and can just say it as it was.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I don't like about hearing these people who go and wait. It's the same thing with Howard was unremarkable as a kid. He was not funny. No one found him funny. Then you get one guy going, he was the funniest. You always knew when you saw Howard, he was going to go place. And you go, are you just saying that? Because you're the only one saying that. And so I do. So I go with what the majority is on those. And also with my own ears, I could hear those tapes and go, okay, he's terrible.
Yeah.
He's not. He's definitely, and I think that if he was being honest, he would say he was very afraid. I mean, he should suffer. I've never heard him talk about this, but more so than most, he should suffer from an imposter complex. He is pretending always. So. And he should be afraid always of being found out. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not into the music we're into. You don't really go get high like we do. In fact, I was going to tell you, I was looking at an old Mark Sprigan thing for something. I was looking for something else, but I found a Wellmet thing where Howard had busted a camper for having weed and made him leave the Western trip. But for Howard to tell it, he's the loose guy. He wouldn't have been the guy to bust somebody. I thought that was revealing. I could see you're preoccupied.
Oh no, I am listening. By the way, no.
Okay.
It's yeah.
So I just thought that was funny that not only. I mean, it's not like he's far from the guy being in his mom's house getting high every day, as he would have you believe. He's instead busting other people for having.
Well, more to the point, he talks in private parts about trying to be a druggie, like trying to put the image of himself as a big druggie, but then doesn't actually smoke the pot that he's going to give to these girls to try to get them to sleep with him, or one of them at least,
or the alcohol.
Yet he would have you believe he was this big, drug nut, and he was a dork. I doubt he even smoked weed ever. Like the whole acid thing, that's possible. Maybe he did some kind of dirt weed or whatever. That's fine. But judging on how he is normally and so controlled and so whatever fearful of everything, I seriously doubt he did more than one puff and then freaked, and then just never touched it again.
But if his friends came forward and said, Howard, that was a placebo. We gave you a sugar pill.
Yeah.
And everything that you went through that night, you imagined. Would you be surprised? I wouldn't. I would go, yeah, he probably, if you told him, oh, wow, you took so many hits of acid, your mind must be in space.
Yeah.
He would believe you and go along with it and say, oh my God, I'm almost dead. Mm-hmm. But then if you told him, it's actually just sugar. I suspect he'd be impressionable. I don't know why he never puts himself. I mean, I guess I understand why he never subjects himself to the hypnotism that he makes Ronnie and Sal go through, because I think he would be just as persuadable as those guys are.
Well, with his eating habits being what they are nowadays, if it was sugar, it would probably just tear his body apart.
He would collapse like Artie.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Howard.
Sugar
Howard did the best he could. He went on the air and he was trying to be one of the DJs, and he was still, being straight.
Yeah. Everybody is a star. The Pointer Sisters on
The Pointer Sisters.
FM. Joan Armatrading before that.
Joan Armatrading.
So this is what, by the way, this is what Howard did to the station that played the Ramones.
Yes.
And played heavy. I should also, when you're a kid and when you get older and you start to see kids from a few years older than you, so let's say you're in junior high or you're in high school, and you start to be around for the first time kids who are really into heavy metal.
Oh yeah.
They are intimidating. They are, when they get the wisps of a mustache and the long hair, and you're still an elementary school kid fresh out of 6th grade, whatever it might be. These kids can be very intimidating. And I've read, obviously I wasn't alive at the time, so I've only read articles about what these DJs were like at the time, and I compare it to my first interactions with kids who were into heavy metal when I was a kid. And it wasn't, back Metallica is like dad music now, but it wasn't a long time ago,
No, at one point it was countercultural.
Yes, and from my experience, it was dirtbag kids who didn't shower who were into heavy metal.
Oh yeah,
and that's what radio DJs were like, especially the kind who Howard was around. They were not. Yeah, they were not having discussion parlors with the neighborhood parents, like Howard's family was. Talking about the latest events in the New York Times.
They did not hire magicians to play their going away.
Yeah, right. Yes. So I think if he was being honest, just to tie this up, he would admit that he suffers from imposter syndrome, where he is not one of these guys. They know it and he knows it, and he's struggling to make them think I'm one of you.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember at the time I was always a t-shirt and jeans kind of guy. I mean, most of the ethnic guys kind of all dressed the same, like Guidos. And what happened, but the difference was, unlike the metal kids that I grew up in high school, like the ones I went to high school with, they would listen to some token albums, but they didn't want to actually do the work and listen to everything. I was a music nerd. So if I was getting into metal, I made sure to get any metal I could: German metal, death metal, thrash, speedcore, agnostic front, anything, and then punk. But I gravitated to punk anyway. So when these guys would start talking, they'd look at me like they all had the T-shirts on. They all wore the Iron Maiden shirts. Didn't own a single Iron Maiden album. It was like 9 Inch Nails fans back in the day. I always said they sold more T-shirts than albums by far. and the 9 Inch Nails in my generation was the Iron Maiden of from 10 years earlier. All those guys that got the Eddie shirts and couldn't tell you a fucking song on, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. But here's the thing. So, but I ended up getting respect for that, because I was really into the music, and a lot of these guys were just fucking posers, in which they grew out and they eventually started, selling used cars. But what Howard, like the whole idea of and there's nothing shameful about wanting to be a straight DJ and just like a straight up FM regular DJ and just getting a nice salary and enjoying your little corner of the world that you work in. But again, the problem is always he would have you believe he started off as this rebel at Boston University campus radio, and then he went from strength to strength. Even though he's telling you, okay, I was awful, he's not really getting into the meat of it. He's not getting into, I mean, he is and he isn't. I think we're getting it's always a mixed bag. Like I had this great desire to do radio, but he's not going hard enough into, I really didn't know what I was doing until I listened to so-and-so. I needed to copy so-and-so. If he did that, I don't even think we'd have a need for some of these shows.
I don't know that he understood why he wanted to be in radio. It's not because he wanted to be able to get music before everybody else did and break it and on the air and have everybody hear it and go to concerts for free, get albums for free, be able to discuss, interview musicians whenever they come into town. He had no interest in any of that. I really don't know if he understood why he wanted to be on the radio, other than I want people to know my name and I want it to be easy. And I want my work to not require much effort. Which you could probably coast on if you just had a few talking points. But what I was going to say was, there was the station, which was experimental and indie kind of, the Ramones and Sex Pistols and so on, which are mentioned there, and the Pointer Sisters don't go together. So the Pointer Sisters are what comes from Howard Stern being put in a position of power, and they decided, we'll get to that, but that's not a guy who says, I care about music. The guy who's hooting along to the Pointer Sisters.
Right. But even more to the point, if he was a person that really cared about music, he'd be the one to argue, it's all valid. I can play New Kids on the Block and I can play Corrosion of Conformity. It's not, I can, it's my show. I can mix Curve into Ravi Shankar into James Brown, and no one's going to give a shit.
It takes a really confident, and you better be able to back it up if you're going to try to pull off something that that unexpected.
Well, you have to have the will. You have to have the self-confidence and the belief and know the music, and he never did. He never does.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's not like he was putting together a Quentin Tarantino soundtrack with every airshift.
I find it funny. He crowbarred the Ramones into a 1997 soundtrack when the Ramones already just broke up, like in 96, 97. That was the end of the band. And he couldn't be bothered to learn Gabba Gabba, we accept you, one of us.
Yeah. It's funny too, is that they put that in the film soundtrack, but on the movie soundtrack, it's Marilyn
Cheap
Manson,
Trick.
whoever. Cheap Trick were they on there on the soundtrack?
I can't remember, but I do remember that wasn't. If I'm not mistaken, it was a Warner's.
It was
soundtrack.
LL Cool J. It was exactly. It was whoever was on Warner, I guess, at the time. So Green Day, a throwaway cover song that Green Day did that was not for that album. I'm going to look up right now the Private Parts soundtrack.
Okay, because if I'm not mistaken, it must have been some contractual thing, because I remember he was also pissed off that Tool was supposed to do a Led Zeppelin medley, but they ended up bowing out, and he gave him shit for years. Every so often he'd talk about, I wouldn't even have them in the studio, and they were down in the lobby, and they were in LA at the time.
Yeah.
Sort of, this kind of bitchiness. And it makes sense if they were all only allowed Warner artists for the album. Although you think somebody like Howard Stern could make sure any band he wanted could be on the album.
I think Howard said whatever bands will sell music is who I want on the album. So he has Rob Zombie.
Yeah.
He's got Flea, Dave Navarro, and Chad Smith. And this is interesting. LL Cool J's name is whited out. I guess it's because he wasn't on the that label, but it just says whited out with Flea, but it's LL Cool J. Porno for Pyros, obviously.
Porno for Pyros, yeah.
Marilyn Manson, Ozzy Osbourne with Typo Negative, Green Day. Oh, Ramones was on there. Pinhead was on there.
Yeah.
Deep Purple.
AC/DC.
Cheap Trick was on there. You're right. Ted Nugent. Cat Scratch Fever. I forgot about that. Van Halen, Jamie's Crying, AC/DC. You Shook Me All Night Long. And then Howard Stern and the Dust Brothers, of course, because it's 1997 and
makes perfect sense.
Whatever is in the zeitgeist right this minute, I need to have
for a film that ends in 1985. That makes perfect sense.
That's great.
Surprised there wasn't some Kid Rock in there.
Although it does begin in 92. But it's got 92 because he's leaving the MTV Awards. So it sort of ends in 92, but there's a big gap.
Right. But there's also the vignettes with Stuttering John and Gary and the porn stars and stuff like that.
What a mess of a movie.
It's a total mess.
Come when you need me. 16 degrees in White Plains with Howard Stern, partly sunny and cold today. Is cold an accurate word for description? I think it's more than cold. I like that word blustery. That kind of describes these days. Blustery cold today.
If I'm not mistaken, that was the word Fred used when Jackie
exactly right. I'm so glad you remembered that, because I remember that too. And Fred said it was blustery, and Howard gave him shit for using such a word.
Oh, yeah.
And here, of all words for Howard to romanticize, blustery is the word that he likes.
Amazing.
High in the low to mid-20s. Increasing cloudiness and continued cold tonight. Low in the teens. Tomorrow will be cloudy and not quite as cold, with a chance of some light snow at times. High in the mid-20s to near 30. I have a friend who called me up last night and said, did you...
Even then he had a friend.
Here, there's going to be 10 inches of snow Saturday. You better cancel your party. I'm having a party Saturday night. I'd love to invite everybody, but my apartment will not hold the massive amounts of audience we have out there.
There's too many friends inside.
So I don't know exactly what year this is, but if it was when you were living at the TM sanctuary, the TM place, which the name escapes me suddenly.
It was men only, but it was monks.
There was no speaking allowed. There was no speaking allowed, let alone partying allowed. But I mean, I don't know if maybe when he says I'm having a party, if he means maybe he and Allison had now moved in together in an apartment, because I do believe they had an apartment together briefly before they moved to Connecticut.
Eventually, yeah.
So
next clip,
maybe it was a housewarming party. I don't know.
Possibly. Next clip is Howard was a mellow jagoff.
If you had talent, you had a place at WRNW to experiment with, and that builds confidence, recalled John Vitiver, host of The Porch Show. You didn't have to stop. You were able to push it as far as you wanted to go. The atmosphere was so open to musical exploration that WRNW spun off perhaps the longest list of well-known alumni among all New York area stations. Joe Piasek, known as Joe from Chicago, was a beloved radio guru, a controlled anarchist in his on-air style. He inspired the timid Howard to loosen his approach and to take the first steps toward developing the crazed persona who would uncork and share with the audience his vulgar obsessions and abundant neuroses. Howard was a mellow jock. He didn't understand humor on the radio, Joe said. He hadn't mushroomed.
There's a bit of a section here that's omitted. Basically, it talks about the diversity of the music being played. So Sun Ra, Buddy Guy, Paul Butterfield, other guests. They'd have Joni Mitchell, Tom Paxton, Jim Dawson, Aztec Two-Step, and whatever. But then, I mean, what it was basically, even if they had to play The Who, they would always shoehorn some kind of alternative act in there as well. And Howard made sure to get rid of The Who, The Stones, and basically it became yacht rock, the way he wanted it. And then it says here, some of the air personalities. The WRNW ranks included Meg Griffin, Al Bernstein, Dan Neer, Harris Allen, Donna Donna, Lisa Carlin, Bob Marone, Tom Morera, and Joe Piasek, or whatever they call it, Joe. And this was Meg Griffin's boyfriend at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he was the program director, right?
Yes, for a while.
As well?
So I'm going to go into that one here. Next clip is called "No Personality, No Taste in Music, No Talent. What a Great Catch."
I recall his voice was very tight and high, and his hair was, very curly and short and cropped. And he had the glasses on. And he just looked goofy, and he sounded goofy, and he was nervous on the air. So, I mean, that's who he was, and it was a complete contrast to the stoned out, burned out hippies and rock and rollers that were doing the radio there. So he was quite a fish out of water at first.
I don't remember much personality, to be honest with you. I really don't. I remember it being kind of safe. I remember.
Okay, a little more.
For really not going out of my way to listen. And he wasn't as relaxed and confident. Obviously, none of us were. So I think it was kind of a little bit higher and a little more sounding like what he thought he was supposed to sound like before he actually defined a style that is completely now owned by him. But you got
that he also ripped off of other people later on. Mm-hmm. This is where she, and being a radio veteran, she had to know he borrowed from as many people as he did.
Well, I would say that she, like everyone else, though, is limited to whatever is available on wherever you are locally. So you could love the radio, but you don't know what's going on in Chicago unless you're having tapes sent to you.
Yeah, I suppose.
So I do think that she might have really believed that Howard just went off into the desert and discovered himself
and just grew.
Maybe. I mean, she might believe that. I don't know. She might not want to question it.
Or she might have questioned it and they edited it out of the audio. Who knows? But I mean, this is Howard Stern's own show, so we know that. Yes, that's entirely possible.
Let's start somewhere.
The consensus, I think, to a man, and I can't speak for everybody, but just everything I had heard is, oh my God, what is he doing on the air?
I was on the air. I was like, all I had to do was spin records, and you could play whatever you wanted.
They didn't even care. He was the program director, but he never gave you a list.
He could care less.
I hate when they make that mistake every time. He could care less. They do that all. That's one. What was the other one that bugs me when I see it in print? Would of is another one, but that one, when I hear it, I just
would
cringe.
OF. Yeah.
Yes.
Would OF.
Oh,
yeah.
for fuck's sake.
I have to wonder why Donald Barnett hired Howard when everyone who heard him said, what is he doing on the air? And, we know that the station ended up selling soon after Howard joined, and they let go of Donald J. Barnett. That was like the first thing that happened. Was he just bombing the station at that point and just going, I don't care. I'm out of here. Hire this kid. I don't care.
It might have been because it was hemorrhaging money. Basically, it was a losing proposition. I mean, you could lose $10 or you could lose a little less, supposedly, the way they explain it. Because they had in the place, they had something like a hairdresser. One room was dedicated to a hairdressing shop. The other was like it could have been a deli or a travel agency. And then one was the radio station. So, I mean, it really does sound like a commune of vocations.
Yeah, they did. They maybe in this history of Howard Stern, they kind of explain that the investors of that station, that it really was a money losing thing. But I think it was by design. It was going to lose money.
Maybe it was meant to be a write-off.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That you could, maybe it's a community thing or who knows, but it wasn't expected to generate lots of money. Now, when it was sold to new owners, they said, we need this to make money. So we're not going to play whatever you guys are excited to be playing. We're going to play tested things that has been marketed and people like it, and we're going to play it.
And proven, yeah.
He was like a real good guy. Just said basically go in there, play whatever you want. Just, make sure you play whatever few commercials we had. We only had like 2 commercials.
Now, let me ask you something. Did you study the music? How did you select your music?
Well, it was stuff I liked.
So it didn't matter.
You want to know how I selected music? I would turn to the wall. They had a huge catalog of music. It was like, albums.
Uh-huh.
I would turn to the wall. I'd stick my hand into the wall. I'd pull out a bunch of them and just play whatever was there. Toss a dart. I didn't care about what, like Meg worked at that station, Meg Griffin and other people who cared about music.
Right.
And they would.
Okay, a little more, guys.
Actually, like, put together sets. I think they actually would prepare.
They studied and put together music that was compatible.
She tells me that they would actually sit there and prepare, like, for their show.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I can do that.
What were you doing?
I don't know.
That type of work ethic carried over into present day where he really doesn't do anything. Now, and as I've said to Sam in a previous broadcast, I'm certain there was a point there, maybe 10 years, where he really did work his ass off, 15 years to get whatever. But ultimately, I think he's been a lazy shit most of his life. And inherently, he is lazy. He doesn't. The idea that Robin was the one to convince them to do mornings, but he decided, like, no, why? We're number one in the afternoons. I think is more really Howard than anything.
Well, yeah, he was afraid to compete with Imus too.
Certainly.
Yeah, we'll get to that chapter, but I do think that his work ethic is largely due to his wanting to avoid his family. Whenever he's got young kids in the house and he's in the basement trying to avoid them, he's incentivized to, if you work harder, we can put your show, Mel's got his expanding empire, as he's going and buying up stations in new markets. Yeah. He's got a momentum behind him.
Yeah.
So there's good reason, and every time he gets a new market, his paycheck goes up.
Yeah.
So there's reason, and he's trying to get on television, very badly trying to get on television. So he wants to avoid his family, and he wants to see his name everywhere he looks, his face everywhere he looks. So there was a reason for that. But then as you could probably say it was once the divorce happens, he has a little bit of that. I'm a hardworking guy because he's going to get that massive serious bonus if he hits his targeted subscriber goal, and that he's got Howard TV he's trying to sell.
Yes.
But once he no longer has no more bonuses coming your way, there's no more Howard TV subscriptions. There's nobody paying you for any extra work. This is your salary. That's it. Then you go, all right, well then. Screw you. I'm not going to work hard, and I'm not going to put other people on my channels.
Yeah, worst business model ever, because if you don't have a carrot dangled in front of him, or let's say, I don't know, a cock, he's not getting out of his chair. That's just the bottom line. And keep in mind, guys, when Benjamin's talking about this machine that was behind him, he was getting it from every angle. So if he changed, he had it written into deals later on where if he got a quarter point interest, he would get 10,000. Like in every quarter, if he got it by a quarter point, that would be a 10,000 bonus, or per quarter point. And then if it was, more advertising, if you had a market, all of a sudden that's even more money for advertising or different advertisers. So he was getting it from every angle by the end, and he got a piece of the advertising. He got a piece of whatever, ratings points and bonuses and payouts and stuff, and stock even, I'm certain. So there was more incentive in the terrestrial days, and you could definitely tell by 2000 when he knows his metrics are actually kind of leveling off and they're not getting any bigger, that he and Don must have had some conversation where we're not going to get any more big paydays if we stay on the radio. If we go for this serious thing, it's possible we can get one last big payday, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they rode the wave of the late 80s and 90s of massive radio markets expanding and consolidate and becoming one brand.
Yes.
So he goes, look, there's Clear Channel, there's Infinity, and basically that's it. What are we going to do? Who else are you going to turn to get money out of anymore?
Yeah.
So, they got their pockets very fat during that period, but then there was no more competition.
No,
to turn your back on and go, I'm going to the other guys. There's only Clear Channel, really.
Yep.
Do remember being music director, I would get many copies of every release that would come out because I would always tell the label, look, if you want us to play it, give me a copy for every one of my jocks so that they can also take it home and then they can know what the music is. I would always get music for everybody. And I do remember like the punk stuff, specifically the Ramones, and we got those import 45s with the picture sleeves. Elvis Costello's single Allison came out.
And they would be worth shitloads of money, especially now. I mean, like the other, and the promo copies was such a thing back in the day. I used to buy a lot of them. The cutout.
Oh yeah,
pulls,
you'd always get them. They'd even say not for sale. Promo use not for sale.
Oh yeah, I think my first copy.
Not taken out of the plastic.
I think Concrete Blonde, Walking in London. That I think I bought a promo copy of that on cassette. That I loved. I thought it was kind of cool actually in a way. Like
I remember.
It wasn't.
I remember having a Sonic Youth CD that I got that was a promotional use only, and I bought that copy because they had a few of them, but I wanted that one because I thought that was cool to have.
Oh, I financed a Jesus and Mary Chain compilation album that was put out by the label at the time. That was just like 10 year like greatest hits kind of thing. That was only meant for promotion. And I sold it on eBay in the early days of eBay when people would send cash in an envelope for like $100 after buying it for like $5 from the pawn shop. It was great. I subsidized a lot. Yeah. I mean, they went into buying more records ultimately, but
even back then, Howard was I don't do my homework kind of guy.
Yes.
So let me explain why I don't listen to music when I get home.
Yeah.
My record player doesn't work. There's always something.
Yeah.
This picture of a girl in a frame and the glass is broken because obviously it's like a breakup song, but back then he was seeing Allison. I don't think they were yet married, and I thought, well, God, this will be the way for me to get him to dig one of these guys, even though it's not a very punky song. And picture sleeve and everything. I figured I'm giving him something cool here.
I'm giving Howard visuals, so it should be up his alley because he does need that guy that gets a book, starts reading it, then every now and then has to look back at the cover to remind himself what it's about and am I still interested? Like a guy that's hung up on visuals and clearly as he is. Let's play a little more.
It's an import, and he just gave it back to me. He said, oh, no, I couldn't play that. I'm like, what is with this guy? So, I just think that he hadn't quite yet figured out who he was going to be on the radio, or he was nowhere near as far out of his shell as he is now. He was definitely looking to move forward in this world, like any of us were in this world of radio, but he was kind of endearingly shy.
But again, guys, the point is at 20, he was a chicken shit. You don't become a rebel in your 20s. You have that.
He was 23 at this point.
Yeah. So okay.
It's funny as she's talking about giving him this thing that she thought he would like. That would be kind of a nice.
Yeah.
I remember whenever it was in 2000, and I was interviewing for this job at an alt weekly. I had just met with one of these editors, the arts and entertainment editor, and I recognized his name because I had seen it before, and I told him, "Oh, I'm glad to see that you like the new Elliott Smith CD, because I've been meaning to get it. I love Elliott Smith."
Mm-hmm.
And he leaves, and he comes back like 5 minutes later with the Elliott Smith CD and gives it to me, the Figure 8 CD, and I always remember going like, "Oh my God!" I was at this interview, and the guy. I told him I was glad to hear that he liked the CD, and he came back and gave me a copy of this new Elliott Smith CD that just came out. So if you like music, that kind of thing, that gesture that she made is memorable, and it's cool, and it's endearing.
Plus, you have a story about that CD.
Yes, and it meant nothing to Howard.
No, of course not. So this next clip is called "How Weird."
Piasek teased Howard, saying, "How weird? Get weird. It's in your name." Howard disliked the nickname, but came to see that his muted approach on the air was a dead end in a business overpopulated with disc jockeys who did little more than announce song titles and weather forecasts. One way that Howard stretched was to drag visitors into on-air conversations. Live exchanges with salespeople, other disc jockeys, even janitors, heralded the kind of radio that he would build around himself as his popularity soared in larger markets afterward. It boosted his popularity. As one colleague put it, he needed someone to play off of. Robin Quivers, Fred Norris, and Jackie Martling would fill that role within a few years.
I think that, and that's probably the basic the basic personality. That's the answer to the whole puzzle. If he doesn't, and now you're hearing it when you listen to modern Howard Stern, by clearing out, by doing the Marcy thing and clearing people out of the hallways and not having them in studio and not allowing them the voice to speak, you're hearing what his show would have sounded like in 1977, not knowing what to say, what to play, how to act, how to be, how to dress, how to react, not having an opinion, and being this kind of very conservative in a weird way, but yet clearly unsure of who he is and what he's doing at any given moment. So him having to pull a janitor in was more about, I didn't have anything to say, so let's get whatever I can get. Let's get the fucking Zodiac killer in, talk to him. That's what he would have done.
And here's what I would say. When you're a drowning man, then anything floating is a life raft to you. And that's what a janitor floating by, there's my life raft I'm going to cling to. And that he's never let go of that. Anything is my life raft because he's constantly drowning. I mean, he always talks about, I could do the show without anybody. If I could just, I don't even need to take call. I could just do whatever. That's obviously not true. It has never been.
That's a huge fallacy. It's always been bullshit. And even Ralph one time said, he could read the phone book and be entertaining. And we've heard what he's like when he's left on his own devices. Just throw a rock at any talk show appearance, even in this heyday. And it's cringeworthy. Did you ever see the Billy West impression of him on The Tonight Show?
I don't think I did.
Oh, you have to watch that.
Is it like a newer? Is it a newer impression?
No, Jay Leno, 1994. He goes in. He's promoting. I'm not sure exactly what he was promoting. It might have been Ren and Stimpy, but either way, Leno wanted to have Billy West on, and he pulls out a wig and he starts imitating Howard. Because he asked him, you can do my voice, but can you do Howard, or are you afraid to? And he had it prepared. He had the sunglasses on, and it was brilliant. And and when we did that, it was a 3-part thing about the John Kay when he brought him in. We did a 3-video thing, which was maybe self-indulgent, but I didn't give a fuck. I loved it. And he nailed the essence of Howard on talk shows. So he made him so perfectly stupid, awkward, stilted, unfunny that I know that was the main reason Howard was probably pissed off at him and said, "No, fuck, we're leaving. That's it. We're not. We're going to make sure you're gone soon."
Yeah, that's a good take. 94 was when I started listening, and Billy was a huge reason that I became a fan.
I was paying like Pablo Cruz. What was the name of that band? Pablo Cruz.
And I'm telling you, not even a week ago, without listening to this, I found a Pablo Cruz cover album to Photoshop and made it just for his purposes. And it's 4 guys topless on a cover with a white background, and it's called Heat Wave or something. And I'm thinking, okay, perfect. This is perfect fodder. And that's exactly what he brings up in this.
So he liked the cover image of the topless guy.
I think so.
So I'm on the air. And,
did you have any information about the music? Would you say something?
No, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about music.
You were a great DJ.
I was not one of these nitwits that sat around and studied groups. I figured, I'm not going to, So I'm on the air, right? I was like, yeah, Westchester 107. And, I didn't have
a little more
deep voice. And whenever I got on the air, early on in my career, I'd be like, my voice was up here. And I was like, Westchester 107. I was like really nervous, and I had a real deep voice when I was off the air, and then I get on the air and I'd be like, Westchester 107.
Yeah, your voice would lock up.
Yeah. Oh, it was a mess. So anyway, we were making $96 a week, and it was really bad. So I get together with this other guy, Mark Drucker. Mark Drucker used to work with DeBella.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what we ought to do? Let's go. I understand
Okay, a little more, guys.
You ever hear this thing called the news blimp?
See, I never knew about it.
All right. There was this thing for progressive, FM stations. It was a syndicated thing. It was called News Blimp.
Uh-huh.
It would come on and go, News Blimp. So I heard they were looking for guys to produce the News Blimp.
I guess it was like an early version of the Chatter.
Isn't that crazy? He worked with Mark the Shark. I completely forgot about this, that he worked with Mark Drucker.
Yeah, there is a little overlap with different people, actually, and like even Al Rosenberg, who, if I'm not mistaken, worked with Steve Dahl, was it? I can't remember, but there's some overlap in terms of people who worked for competitors who also worked with him. Like Ted Utz, I think Ted Utz did work with DeBella, if I'm not mistaken.
MMR,
yeah. So there's some, and then for some reason, even though they're associated with these guys, they don't necessarily get the heave ho from him. Like, even though there's a connection, it's not, oh, fuck him, he's with him, he's not with us. And I find that a little odd, because normally his personality would be, look, when Ganji went out to visit the fella he sued in Los Angeles for Are You Hot? We did a whole podcast about him. Not Greenstein.
The guy who went down to the greatest race or whatever it's called.
That's right. Now it's
Einziger or
Einziger. That's, you got it. I was thinking Scott Greenstein. It was Scott Einziger, and so he gave Ganji shit for going to visit him, even though he was suing him at the time. Howard was suing him, and he said, "Why are you visiting the enemy? What's that about?" Even though they were all friends and it had nothing to do with them, that was Howard's business.
Yeah.
So that's
like Ganji stood to gain anything from this lawsuit.
Totally. Yeah.
And they'd send you a script.
And then you just lay it down and put it on tape.
It was a news story, and you're supposed to cut comedy bits to it. Except I didn't know any comedy bits. Like, I wasn't a collector of records. I didn't have a lot of albums.
So he didn't collect music, didn't care about comedy, decided to put in his book ratings of comedians.
And has contempt for those who do like music and can buy records. It's really baffling.
Yeah.
And you had to put cool, weird, funny comedy bits in.
So you're supposed to know a lot about comedy and be able to slip that stuff in.
So not only did you have to voice it, and you had to voice it like a cool FM disc jockey, you had to be like, "This is Howard Stern on the News Blimp."
Oh, dear.
I was trying to sound like these guys.
See, I never heard it, so I don't know what they sounded.
Well, they sounded like this. Hear like the News Blimp. They had a weird affectation.
Uh-huh.
And I was trying to sound like them. So I'd fit in, and they say,
"Okay, a little more, guys. We're almost done."
In the script, they say, "Just produce it like a news blimp. Put in some comedy and some music." So I didn't know what to do. And the only two comedy albums we had at the station were Stella and Mira.
Oh, goodness.
And Robert Klein.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a Cheech and Chong album, maybe. So all of my news blimps and all of Drucker's news blimps
had the same comedy.
Had the same comedy bits. So now, this is all I had. What am I going to do? I couldn't even afford a comedy album.
I couldn't believe you had the balls to say that. Okay.
What was the cost of an album back then, out of curiosity?
I guarantee, because I was still, the first album I bought was Kiss, LP, when I'm talking about, with my own money. I was 7 years old. I bought Kiss Love Gun, and it had cigarette burns on the cover. It was really the shittiest possible copy you could get. And I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, $5.99 with tax used.
Yeah, it says so.
That was 82.
Record. Yeah. Okay. $9.98. Apparently, the actual going rate was around $7. Apparently, this is just a quick Reddit search. $6 or $7 was how much it cost. So, if this was 77, late 77 or early 78, he was already making that $12,000 a year, and you could certainly afford. I mean, his dad was paying for his gas. His dad had bought him his car.
Yeah, he had no expenses, and I'm sure. Well, maybe he couldn't afford the Jack in the Box.
You couldn't invest a little bit. You're expecting to get paid for the news blimp. You couldn't turn around and take some of that money and invest it so that you have some, material to put in your next news blimp.
I think even then somebody else had to pay. Somebody else had to foot the bill for whatever he needed to do. Yeah. He's not going to invest in himself. Next clip. Listen to Dark. listen to Darth
That's a
Kermit.
good callback to the Howard Stern motto: never invest in yourself.
Never. Listen to Darth Kermit as he manipulates time and space to sound like he has a set.
What did you?
Oh, and then the big payoff was after you produce this thing, which was taking me 17 hours to produce.
Right.
They pay you $25. Wow. But if I could produce 2 of them a week, I'd have an extra $50.
Sure, when you're only making that's supplementing your salary by half.
Yeah, it's like a pretty good thing, and I'm sure after taxes I would have been left with like $12. At some point I think if people make like $96 a week, I don't think the government should take taxes. I really
Why
don't.
is the government messing with your salary?
They should take taxes.
So you couldn't invest not even $10 of the 25 that you could use again and again and again for these news blimps, whatever, and it would pay for itself inside of one news blimp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Out of my $96. Anyway, so I have Gary claims this is the news blimp. I don't know how he got it.
Let's hear it.
So this is the thing they send you. They send you the beginning.
Right.
Okay.
The sound
Yeah.
effects.
They send you like a beginning thing.
This is excruciating, by the way. I've heard this thing many times. I hate it.
Guys, if you thought King Schmaltz was awful, like just listen to this.
Beatles, of course.
Music going on.
Wait a minute. Let me see.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rhoda Blabbett.
It seems movie stars and hermits aren't the only ones concerned about maintaining their privacy.
Link Luxon, rising.
That's Stella Ramiro.
Yes, you've got a mirror on here. And you produced this whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
As if you didn't know he was completely manipulating his voice to try to sound cool, but he just sounds like a dork. Okay.
Yeah.
Young star has committed what we consider to be the scandal of the industry.
Businesses of all sizes are asserting the Constitution protects them against unreasonable search and seizures, just as it protects private citizens. Businesses are using those constitutional safeguards of privacy to keep federal regulators.
Now, you can tell I don't even know what I'm reading. I don't even know what the script, but I didn't write the script. They send you the script. It was a boring story.
So even then he needed script writers, of course. That isn't changed.
Billy does an impression of him in this, right?
Billy?
If I remember
Billy
right, does he start doing an impression of him in this?
No, I don't
If I'm
believe
thinking
so.
of the same clip.
Well, if this is him recalling in like mid 90s, it's possible, but I don't know if it's included in this.
No. I'm saying as they listen in the mid 90s, I think Billy chimes in with an impression of Howard from the 70s.
Right. I don't know if it's part of this though. I don't know if because knowing Howard, they cut it out of the history of Howard Stern because they wouldn't have wanted him in there except for the Billy West parts.
Hell is this?
I don't know. I didn't know. I just wanted $25.
You're really reading it like you understand.
Yeah, I had no idea what the guy. I didn't even know how to read. It was just like federal regulators. First Amendment. I was trying. Okay. What?
There he is.
Yeah. All right.
And inspectors off of their property.
Hold it! Security, where do you think you're going?
Oh, we're done now. Well, we're just going to go home.
Just going to go home?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm sorry, you'll have to have a pass.
Okay, last bit, guys.
Well, we don't have a pass.
You don't have a pass?
No, sir.
Well, how did you get in here?
Huh?
You up against the wall. Turn around.
Dow Chemicals sued the Environmental Protection Agency for invasion of privacy when the EPA took aerial photographs of one of its plants to check on pollution emissions. Dow had previously told the...
Come on, 1976.
So 76. So he was still 21?
He's lying. Yeah, he's lying about the year.
Okay, fair enough.
Because he started in 77.
Yeah. So again,
this is more like 78.
Maybe 78.
Did you cut off the clip? There's a clip?
No, there's about 18 seconds left. You want to hear the rest of it?
Yeah, because I think Billy chimes in.
Okay.
All right, I said it sucked. Yeah.
There he goes.
You know what it is? I think I slowed my tape down so that my voice would be...
Yeah, because it's awfully slow.
Yeah. Well, that was me trying to be a disc jockey. I told you I was a sucky disc jockey.
So there you go. He admits already, from that early age, having to alter his voice to make himself sound better than he actually sounds normally. So God only knows. I mean, if you really want to hear him high pitched, it's that Amanda Peet rant when he says, he talks about her on the talk shows. If you want to hear the high pitched, him with the original alarm clock orgasm speaker lady, that's really Howard. And you did a great compilation of that on YouTube.
Oh, thanks. And that woman even says, Howard, I don't like this new voice you're doing.
The Billy Goat.
Yeah, he was doing because his voice was. He said that he thought his voice sounded good that day because he was a little bit sick. And Robin agrees with the caller. I don't like this. I like your normal voice because he's trying to sound cool by deepening it.
Oh, it's awful.
You wonder how somebody gets away with just changing their voice.
Yes.
And it's kind of. I guess it's not as gradual because on that day, both Robin and the caller were saying, "I don't like this."
Let me see if I can just bring it up real quick.
Okay.
Because I did clip it for a. Let's see. That's it. Okay. It says right here, but I got to find the exact one.
Man, is my voice deep today or what?
If I take that girl.
See this.
My kids aren't going to see it.
We're all
rub it against.
Okay, so I'm going to forward it to the point where he goes, well, see, did nothing happen to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't stand the voice, Howard, though.
There.
You can feel that? There. You still can't stand that?
Yeah.
Get back on your radio.
Please.
Turn the volume up all the way.
No, you sound so nice, your normal voice, and now you come with this little silly, I don't know.
I know, it's awful. It's sickening.
It is awful, Howard.
Well, I always felt I didn't have like a real radio voice, you know?
Oh, no, but you have a sexy voice.
Hey, sit back down. You mean nothing happened to you?
Yeah.
Tiny Tim sounds like James Earl Jones compared to Howard in this.
Yeah. So the caller, I like that she called him out on this. I don't like this new voice that you're doing.
Right. And it's, yeah. The last one is called Rejection Comes Naturally to Tzvi. It's a real short clip.
And you know what? I sent it into them and they rejected it.
Oh, no. After all this hard work.
And I put like 3 hours into it.
Yeah, I can tell the work.
Mixing all the music in and all the comedy. Comedy. I don't even know what the comedy meant. I don't even know what the whole story meant.
I don't. Yeah, well, the comedy certainly isn't helping the story.
Should I keep playing it?
Yeah.
To get a search warrant if the federal investigators wanted to inspect the plant.
I'm sorry, it's just too much, and I think I'm going to do something horrible.
Okay, last bit, guys.
Somebody does something to change all of this.
General Motors, Chrysler, and American Motors are all suing the Federal Trade Commission, saying the FTC investigation into the auto industry.
Can you imagine listening to this?
Howard, are you telling different stories?
I don't know. I don't even know what it meant, but I remember getting a script and not knowing what it meant.
Understand this.
I know. I was bad. It got rejected.
It's not
a new disc jockey.
It's not even connected. And number one, can you imagine Ben Stern having to hear this and review it and tell his son what he thinks?
I mean, I don't know what a news blimp is, but I would assume that they say, take this copy, splice in comedy that seems to be reacting to it, whatever, to take a their favorite word, a straight story, and put a little
spin,
put a little seasoning on it, with some comedy. So here's what they do on YouTube nowadays. Like the Family Guy cutaways. Everybody on YouTube now, when they make a video, they'll make a statement and then they'll cut away to a movie clip that's reacting to it, that's whatever, and then back to where they are. That's just the audio version. They were looking for the audio version of that. So you're saying the prices have gone up, and it'll cut to some movie where they're like, say what or whatever. That's what they're looking for. Not completely just throw any comedy, throw in anything let it run as long as you want, and then cut back to yourself. You're completely baffling the listener. They're going, "What am I listening to?" That's the understanding he had of comedy.
Yeah. Well, again, if you have no instinct for timing, you have no natural. I mean, he tried to. Like if we're going to distill his whole essence down into one thing, I guess it's supposed to be him and Ray at the kitchen table tearing everyone else apart to make fun at their own for their for the expense of comedy there to make Ray happy, to get along with her, and but it doesn't include memorizing comedy bits like I said earlier. But either way, guys, this is the end of this episode. It's going to be a little longer than usual. We hope you've appreciated it, and if you love our stuff on the Sunday shows, please tune in to Patreon. Check out, we've got a bunch of tiers there. The $2.50 tier will get you 50% of Patreon episodes and all Sunday episodes for any month, whether it's 4 or 5, depending on the month in question. And Ben, I want to thank you for sitting on this one. And Sam, we're really sorry you couldn't make it for this one.
Yeah, I hope you join us on the next one.
Yeah,
I'm sure she will.
Yeah, she will. It's just these days, guys. It's unfortunately with when the weather's as bad as I'm sure it is. It's Wi-Fi gets fucked, everything gets fucked. So bear with us, and we're gonna steam. We're happy we're able to steamroll ahead, but at the same time, we're gonna get a full deck on board for the next one. So have a good one. We love you. Take care.
If you went through the most incredible metamorphosis and somehow transformed yourself into the best person you're capable of being, and you and Lisa G, after that metamorphosis took place, were on the top floor of a burning building, and it's just you two, and God told Lisa, I will give you the ability to fly if you kiss John the Stutterer, she would say no.
I know. Well,